Good evening, and welcome to this regular meeting of the Northside Board of Trustees. Before calling this meeting to order, the board would like to take just a moment to briefly review some of the rules for conducting our meeting. The order of business for the meeting is set out in the agenda. One item that you may notice on the agenda is the consent agenda. This item includes items that are considered routine and/or are of a recurring nature. All of the items listed under the consent agenda will be acted upon in one motion. If there is a consent agenda item which anyone here would like to address, please sign up to speak to that item and we will pull it from consent and discuss it separately. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct board business, and for that reason, it is held in public. It is not a public forum, however. We do provide the opportunity for audience participation. If there is anyone who would like to address the board during an agenda item or citizens to be heard portion of the agenda, we ask that you please complete a sign-up sheet located at the entrance to this room. This is so we don't overlook anyone who would like to speak to the board. We will review the rules for addressing the board later in the meeting. Is there anyone here who would like to sign up to an agenda item that has not already done so? Okay, Bobby. Okay, thank you. This meeting will be conducted via video conference and was posted as such under Texas Government Code 551.127, which will be audible to the board and public and allow for communication among trustees. The meeting is also being live streamed to the public. At this time, we will take attendance by roll call for the record. Please say here as I call your name. Trustee Joseph Medina. And he currently is not here. I know he'll be coming in late, and when he does, we will correct the record to show that he was here. Trustee Gerald Lopez. Here. Trustee Corinne Saldana. Here. Trustee Melissa Chumley. Here. Trustee Dr. Carol Harrell. Here. Trustee Karen Freeman. Here. Did I call everybody? That was... Trustee Bobby Blunt.
Yeah, here.
Trustee Bobby Blunt, okay.
Did we forget you, Bobby?
I knew someone was off the list. Okay. For the record, we do have a quorum of the board, either present or attending by teleconference. The meeting will now be officially called to order. Please stand and bow your heads as Trustee Gerald Lopez leads us in the invocation and pledges of allegiance.
Almighty and merciful God, we ask your guidance and blessings upon this board, students, parents, patrons, teachers, and administrators, as we are assembled here this evening in the common pursuit of this great nation's wealth, our children. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you.
Right. First item on the agenda is superintendent's. Do I have that right? Where am I? Yes, superintendent's report. Dr. Woods.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Freeman and members of the board, a few things to report to you tonight. I'll start with some operating during COVID updates. We are still running testing at a number of large-scale public sites. We have stood up a staff and immediate family testing site to try to speed the process of staff being able to return to the campus once they're well. We continue to offer a number of vaccine clinics each week at sites spread throughout the district. As you know, absenteeism of both students and staff has been a major concern in the first 3 weeks of the new semester and threatens the continuation of in-person learning. There is some good news on that front. We have shown some improvement the first couple of days of this week, but need more data to determine if that's a trend. We have postponed a handful of purely ceremonial, mostly adult type events, but we're trying to continue with all student events as they were originally scheduled, and with the exception of some sub-varsity athletics, we've been able to do that. Moving on, I want to take a moment to thank Cassandra Miranda in the Partnerships Office. She and her team, along with, of course, a number of business partners, participated in our foundation clay shoot recently and raised a good, healthy amount of money that will go in grants to staff that will directly benefit students. So thanks to everybody who participated in that. I had the chance to go and watch some of both of the district swim meets last weekend, and I think we qualified a record number of students for the regional meet, which will be this coming weekend. So congratulations to all of our swimmers and divers who qualified to move on in their competition. Last weekend, we kicked off the 49th annual Walter Gerlach Livestock Show with the Agriculture Mechanics Show, and I know Mrs. Chumley and I were able to be there, and the projects were absolutely amazing in both design as well as in construction, but listening to the kids, the students, talk about their inspiration for the project, how they did, why they did what they did, how they put it together, the number of hours they spent on it, not a one of which was less than 100 hours, was really, really amazing. It was really inspirational. The Gerlach Show culminates on Saturday with the sale event. And a note of appreciation to the members of our board, to say that it's been a challenging couple of years for all of us, and I don't just mean the board and I, but for all of us, especially those who are associated with schools and obviously healthcare. I want to thank the staff for working together to keep services for students going as well as possible, especially in these last 3 weeks. I thank the members of the board for their work and support of me and of the staff during this now quite long time of challenge that we've been working through. And Ms. Freeman, that concludes Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. Next item on the agenda, board members' reports. At this time, any board members would like to make some comments? Dr. Harrell, I think you're... I don't have any lights in front of me, but I see that you're reaching to turn your mic
Yeah,
on.
thank you. No, I just wanted to echo Dr. Wood's gratitude for the Northside administrative staff and all the department staff that went out to the schools to provide support. But I think mostly I wanted to and I really don't have the words for it. I wish there were words that express the immense gratitude that I know the Board of Trustees shares with me for our teachers and our campus staff for pulling together. I know the absenteeism rates for both staff and students have been so high, as you mentioned earlier, and I know they're just pitching in. They're doing whatever they can to meet the needs of our kids. My grandkids have been so happy that school's been open. My colleagues that work in Northside, my friends that are in Northside are so understanding that having a mask mandate also helps mitigate some of the effects of the viruses, but also allows our schools to be open and our kids to be safe. And so I'm just very, very grateful for all of that. I do want to also say thank you, and I know several of the trustees have been invited to schools this week and last week to share in our celebration of being board members and volunteers for Northside, and we thank them. I get to go to Anson Jones on Friday, and so in the new magnet there as well, so I'm real excited, and I know we also will have stories to tell about that. So thanks again, and happy School Board Trustees Month.
Thank you, Dr. Harrell. Anyone else? Ms. Chumley?
First off, I want to apologize for my appearance. I just finished working the hog show at the Gerlach Show, and I'm very glad that we are spaced here. But again, I want to apologize. I normally don't come to a board meeting looking like this, but I didn't want to be really, really late either. So a couple of things. I wanted to thank Saw Ross Middle School for the invitation to their luncheon right at the end of Christmas break, right before Christmas break or holiday break. I absolutely love that campus, and I know that I keep saying that, but I love the feel of it. It's always so clean and well-kept, and their staff is just joyous in their approach to children. And so I just want to thank everyone on that campus, the principal and Irene, and just all of the teachers and all of their support staff. Is just a really wonderful place to be, and I very much enjoyed the luncheon and being able to talk to the teachers that were there. I also wanted to congratulate A.J. Talamontes, the American Library Association. He won an award as I Love My Librarian. He's an I Love My Librarian award winner, and so I wanted to congratulate A.J. Not only is he responsible for the Saul Ross Library, but he started a book shop, I guess, I'm trying to think what to call it, where kids could come, they get points for good behavior and different things, attendance, things that the school has, and then they get to come and get those, use those points to buy books. And so he has just this whole bookshop full of books, and it's just, it's a great idea, and the kids really love it and embrace it. I wanted to thank Ray Galindo, Eric Tobias, Steve Daniel, and Julianne Matonis. Thank you all very much for coming out to Gerlach today. The parents and the students know that you're there, and they very much appreciate y'all's support. So thank you very much for coming out and braving the hog barn today. I want to echo Dr. Wood's comments in relation to AgMech. I was extremely impressed with the projects that the kids have built this year for that program, and a lot of them will be going on to the San Antonio Stock Show as well and other stock shows. But it's amazing seeing, and I'm gonna just, it's not that the men, it isn't an accomplishment for our young men, but it's really neat to see these young women that can actually weld and build trailers, full trailers. It was just really astounding. And so I just wanted to echo that because I was really impressed, and I don't think that people recognize when we talk about ag mechanics how much physics and algebra and math go into it, and then the design work and the creativity and the innovativeness that our students have within this program. So I just wanted to echo that as well. And riding on Dr. Harl's coattails, I know it's been a really tough, it's been a tough 2 years, but it's been a really tough couple of months. I think that we start to think we're making headway, and then something happens, and it's like we take a step forward and two back. But I really want to thank all of our staff, and I know that it's hard for you to really understand or really know how much you are appreciated, but I know that teachers are really giving it their all, and I just really want to thank our teachers and our support staff, and I want to thank our students for hanging in there. It was really interesting talking to kids today at the show, how much, I talked to a couple of seniors, and they had talked about how grateful they are to be back in school and to be participating in extracurricular events, and that, you know, some of them have lost their sophomore and junior years. And so it was just really neat to get their perspective of how this has impacted them and how appreciative they are to be back in school. And I know that we all are not always going to agree, but I do want to say that we're trying to do our level best to do what's right for our kids and to try to keep our staff and our children safe. And I know that that's, again, I see a gentleman shaking his head, that's something we may not agree on, but I do want you to know that there is the best intent, and I think that we're trying extremely hard to keep kids as our #1 focus. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chumley. Ms. Saldana?
I would just like to add that I believe this month was also Police Month, and I would like to thank all of our campus police officers who do such a great job of maintaining order in our district, and we do appreciate that, along with all the custodial staffs, the cafeteria staffs that have been working so hard trying to keep everything as normal as possible for our kids.
Thank you, Ms. Saldana. Mr. Lopez?
Just wanted to let everybody know that on January the 11th and the 13th, Northside, or the Northside Fine Arts Department had a middle school, what they call middle school winter spectacular. And it was highlighting a lot of the fine arts dance programs in our middle school. And it was very successful. There was a lot of work that was put into it by our teachers and the fine arts department. So just wanted to say thank you to James Machoka and the fine arts department there, and our fine arts teachers and our students. It was very challenging for them, but they went ahead and they did it, and it was a big success. And from my understanding, parents were really excited and they wanted to see their kids dance, so that was awesome. So I just wanted to highlight that event and the success and the fine arts department for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Medina, we're on board members' report. First of all, welcome. I know that you've had a challenge getting here from the other side of town. Appreciate you being here. Is there anything that you would?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So, did I cut someone off?
No, you didn't.
Okay. So, first and foremost, it's been a pretty exciting couple of weeks. There's been a couple one-point games between basketball games, and so our community is really out there cheering our basketball teams on both sides, the girls and the boys. And so if you have time, definitely make it a point sometime in the next few weeks, go out there and cheer on our boys and girls. Over the past weekend, I had the opportunity to travel to the National School Board Association meeting, the Advocacy Institute, and we went over a lot of legislative priorities that are crucial not only locally but nationally, and one of those is obviously some of the shortages as we hear and see throughout, include from all walks in the human capital side of public education. And so they spoke about some needs that need to be met on both ends, where the government side as well as the common good for the public. And so there was a lot of points that were being made and bills that are being re-reviewed with legislators who congressional who are looking to co-author to make sure that certain parts are held to meet their standard as appropriation committees continue to meet. And one of those items specifically was the IDEA, where students with special needs, it's been committed since it's originated over 40 years ago, committed 40% of their appropriation to special ed services, but since its existence, never has the federal obligation has ever been met. So currently there are meeting near about 15%, almost 25% deficit of their 40% to provide services for. So there's a lot of work that's being had and will be continued conversations with local congressional offices. And so that's something that we're going to keep an eye on as well. Also going into the communication part of public education, not only trust in their legislators, but trust across the board and the diplomacy that's going on both local and nationally. And so there are a lot of key topics that we need to make sure that we keep a pulse on, and as well as other rhetorics that are important to kind of keep our ear and our pulse, a finger on the pulse. And so I also had a pretty neat co-pilot with me, or an extra body. And so with that being said, my son, who's a senior here in one of our high schools, had the fortunate opportunity to be on a student panel. And part of being on the student panel is looking at the perspective and the lens of being a child in the classroom as he speaks on behalf of the 74 million students nationwide. And he was one of three. 2 others were local there. And it was a great opportunity to throw a plug in for Northside ISD, as well as the preparation that we focus on that career pathway. And so he shared, his perspectives, what was good, what was bad. He was candid. Some of it, obviously, you want him to be himself. But he really was proud of his teachers. He loved them, and he did talk about some of his teachers. And so, obviously, it's not his role to judge anybody, but he also shared some other insights. And so it was really eye-opening for most of those individuals, people that were flying in from as far as Alaska, Illinois. They were talking about Illinois, all states throughout the nation. And it was probably the most received presentation during that time, to hear it from the voice of a child that's sitting in the classroom. What excites them to be in that classroom? How do teachers keep them engaged and keep their interest? How they connect to the classroom and connect to how the schooling system helps them become sustaining themselves in as an adult. And so it was a really eye-opening experience, but it was also a gift at the same time. So I wanted to share that with everybody. It was a great opportunity, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Medina. It was an honor for him to be there. Mr. Blunt.
Yeah, now I wish I went before you went, but that was really good. I was just going to pass on a couple of upcoming opportunities for board members and some of the general public, some activities that are coming up. First, the Go Public campaign, advocating for public education on behalf of our Bexar County and surrounding area districts. That definitely continues to be active. Upcoming event, hopefully we'll be able to come through with this one on February 4th. Hopefully everybody knows, is the San Antonio Spurs. They're going to have a Go Public Day out there and a celebration that particular evening. So I want to remind everybody of that part of it. The other one, and this was, yeah, I'll make sure you get the information on how to get tickets. It's online, but I'll make sure that we send that out to everybody. Good. And thanks to our middle and high school science team, we've got our Science Bowl that's coming up that Northside is the sponsorship for, or Department of Energy National Science Bowl competition, which includes public, private, and charter schools, which really good thing for Northside to continue to provide the leadership on that. But that's coming up February 4th and 5th. It will be virtual, a little bit larger than we had anticipated, but I think that's going to go well. If anybody wants to volunteer and be a judge that night, definitely still looking, so let us know on that part. Either Friday or Saturday, February 4th or February 5th. And it's in the evenings on February 4th, starting about 5 o'clock. Okay. The Texas Caucus of Black School Board Members, I've been actually planning out the agenda and the format for that. That's going to be at the Kalahari up in Round Rock currently on March 10th and 12th. So this year's conference, I think, is going to be pretty interesting, because we're really bringing forth a lot of different districts that have different way of doing things and looking at things. So we're having more type of panel type discussions on how that occurs, how one district sees this, how they may do a little bit differently this year. So that'll be a 2-day event. I want to make sure everybody knows. And then the last thing I had, I'll pass off, and y'all did a wonderful job of thanking all of our employees in Northside, and I'll reiterate that. And I'll add one other element too. I want to thank, it seems like lately our community has really taken, in San Antonio, has really taken a further interest in education and partnership opportunities with our universities and others. So I think that's going to lead to some promise. We've got some challenges right now, but I think these partnerships and the things that are occurring right now are really promising. So I just want to pass that on too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Blunt. I have a couple items. I was invited to Zachary Middle School Magnet open house was a couple weeks ago. I was so excited. They had a cafeteria full of families that were truly interested in the program. And it was an opportunity to hear, in general, some things about the program, and then they had the opportunity to go visit with teachers. I think one of the most exciting things for me was to actually talk to the kids that are currently in the program. They were very excited about being there, and were really very articulate in talking to other students and parents of students who are interested in being part of that program. So I was really, really encouraged and enthused by the interest in that. Also, many people here tonight have thanked the teachers. I got to tell you, our teachers, staff, administrators have truly met challenges head on. They did what they needed to do to keep the doors open, and I appreciate all the work that has gone into that. And I will say, it was interesting, one of our media outlets covered one of our elementary schools. In Dr. Woods' video, he asked if there were any parents that were interested in helping out at school in volunteer work. Parents volunteer all the time, but there's an extra need right now for parents to be in our schools. So one of the media outlets covered one elementary school, and there were parents working in the cafeteria, cleaning tables, helping kids with trays, people, volunteers in the office doing some office work, and all across in the library, all across the school. And I know that that's not the only elementary school that we've seen, or any school in the north side that we've had that blessing, if you will, for our volunteers to come in. So I don't know that we have that particular group in here tonight, but I'd like to reach out, send them hugs, and a big thank you for all that they've done in truly helping us keep these schools open. And that ends the board members' report. Dr. Woods, next item on the agenda is citizens to be heard. We believe citizens to be heard is important and meaningful. We value your opinions, and we will listen to what you have to say, although we are restrained by law from taking any action or engage in dialogue pertaining to your comments. We ask that you please address your remarks to the board, confine your remarks to a Northside policy or practice, limit your remarks to 3 minutes. At 2 minutes, our board secretary, Trustee Joseph Medina, will hold up a yellow card, at which time you need to think about wrapping up your remarks. Mr. Medina will then hold up a red card at the end of 3 minutes to indicate that your 3 minutes is over. Please do not make personal attacks on individuals or call out individuals by name, and we ask that you be respectful with your remarks. Dr. Woods, you have the list of those who have signed up.
Yes, ma'am, I do. First on the list is Courtney Pessa.
Good evening. Have you thought about what your roller coaster mandates are doing to the mental health of our children? Because I don't think you have. Bright, thoughtful, educated administrators think through these things. Educated, thoughtful people don't jerk children around by their masks. Nuremberg and Wolf have stopped their nightly briefings on COVID cases and death rates. So where are the hundreds of children hospitalized from this very deadly epidemic of extremely mild symptoms? I am a mental health professional, and I have to deal with the fallout of all of y'all's decisions. I know you tune us out when we start to recite statistics, so I'm just going to be very general here and say that teen suicide rates have increased. If you're aware of the numbers in your schools and your districts, you know this to be true. A completed suicide is much worse than getting COVID. Without comorbidities, children do not die from COVID. They especially do not die from Omicron. And yet, the masks are put back on. Self-harm has escalated in our children, especially with girls. I tried to get a client into Clarity Psychiatric Hospital a few months ago to suicidal ideation and cutting, but there were no beds available. And I was told that there's probably none in the foreseeable future either. Our kids need structure, healthy boundaries, and a sense of normalcy. At school, they're hearing, you don't wear a mask, you're bad. At home, they're allowed to take the mask off. It's so confusing for our little ones. And y'all provide none of that structure for our kids. These kids are our future, and do you wonder what kinds of people you're creating with this? Hypochondriacs, recluses. I have many children afraid to go outside and play. Maybe you're helping to create mental illnesses that we haven't even heard of yet. Mass psychosis, I see that everywhere now. This public school system in America is bloated and broken. A new day is coming, and if things don't change, none of you will be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. I ask that you please refrain from either clapping or showing a positive reaction or a negative reaction to someone who has spoken. Thank you. Dr. Woods?
Nathan Matchick.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Matzik. I come today as the father of two young children that go to your school district. We teach them to be respectful to their teachers, and they're too young to defend themselves, so I'm here to defend them from all of you. I attended Northside from kinder all the way through graduation, and not once has the existence of this board ever been a consideration for me, but congratulations on finally getting me out here. I disagree with your implementation of the mask mandates. Let's look at it in the context of your responsibilities, those being 1, education of the students, and 2, the safety and well-being of the students and staff. As far as your responsibility education goes, there's a recent university from Brown University study that concluded that social distancing measures, including face masks, are suspected of causing young children's development to drop by up to 23% during the pandemic. They used the early learning composite, verbal development quotient, and nonverbal development quotients to assess as the basis of these evaluations. That being said, have you conducted any of your own studies or done any research to ensure your measures aren't detracting from your primary role of education? Considering you are a school board and not a public health authority, this should be your focus. Now, as far as the safety and well-being of the students, statistically, COVID poses a 2 out of 1 million chance of death to anyone 18 years and younger. Children are over 10 times more likely to die from a traumatic injury than die from COVID. For the vast, overwhelming majority, this virus causes a 36-hour fever and some congestion. The same things kids have been trading at school since the beginning of time. The kids are already well protected by their God-given miracles of immune systems. They don't need mask mandates to protect them. As far as protecting your staff, adults aged 22 to 65 have a less than 0.5% chance of mortality. It seems to me, given the high turnover rate and burnout these teachers are experiencing, you have a lot more work to do in a lot of different, more important areas as far as teacher well-being is concerned. From what I can see, you're falling short of those 3 areas of responsibility with this mandate. My kids used to love going to school. They hate going to school now. They don't feel like themselves when they have to wear dirty, demoralizing, dehumanizing, and quite frankly, worthless masks because they don't wear them correctly. And we all know that an elementary kid isn't going to wear a mask the correct way, the CDC way that says is the only way they are effective. In a free nation, I shouldn't even have to ask this, so I won't. I demand it. I demand that you return our parental rights to evaluate risks versus benefits, and to make our own informed decisions for our own families and children. The 2023 and 2025 elections for
Sir,
your
I'm
seats
sorry.
cannot come soon enough.
Sir, I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you.
Shane Hernandez.
First, I'd like to say I'm wearing a mask not in false hope that it will stop transmission of COVID, but to ensure I don't lose the ability to exercise my right to speak this evening. Your decision to disregard freedom of choice, the direction of the governor, and TEA is appalling. We won't talk facts, but thoughts such as, my mask only works if you wear a mask, my vaccination only works if you're vaccinated. I am shocked by the lack of common sense, but more importantly, the lack of respect towards one another and their medical choices. You can say it's not political, but your actions speak louder than words, and the facts are clear. Every week you continue to require masks, I will file a new complaint with the Attorney General and TEA. You have failed our children and provided them with a perfect example of what's wrong with our world.
Thank you. Dr. Wood?
Folks, we've had an issue in the past where the board president has asked the group not to respond to each other's talking points. We're going to ask you again. If that can't happen, we're going to clear the room and call the speakers in one at a time. This board is being respectful of your comments and your opinions. We asked you to be respectful of the rules for the board addressing the board. Next speaker is Nathan Buchanan.
Good evening. My name is Nathan Buchanan. I have two children that previously attended NISD schools. Sorry. I have two children that previously attended NISD schools, and I withdrew them, and they have been homeschooled now because of the circus show that continues to take place within our districts, which is using our children to fulfill a political agenda. I personally think that the online distance learning was one of the best things that y'all could have done for our kids, though. It allowed us parents to see exactly what kind of agenda y'all are pushing onto our children. But it doesn't just stop with our learning, with the children's learning. It continues on with the muzzling of masks, with the piece of cloth that has been proven time and time again to be ineffective. When is this going to stop? What's it going to take for this to end already? This is going on 2 years, and it's continuing. You know, at this time, I want to put y'all on notice. I am currently running for county judge to replace Nelson Wolf. And I promise y'all, should I win this election, I will be a thorn in your side. I will be here at every single meeting amongst other districts also, fighting for our children's rights. Our governor, the TEA, countless people have already put this in there. It's law, basically. Y'all can't be doing this. But y'all continue to do this, and telling us that we can't clap is ridiculous. I'm sorry. That's my personal thoughts. But just as easy as Nelson Wolf signed these executive orders into place, forcing our children to wear masks, forcing us to wear masks, as your next county judge, I will remove them quickly and immediately. You need to leave our kids alone already and let our parents do what they feel is right for the children. Your job is to educate the children, and that's it. If a parent wants their kid to wear a mask, then they'll let their kid wear a mask. That's up to the parent, not the mayor, not the county judge, and most definitely not the school district. So stop allowing politics to play into your decision-making and letting certain individuals pull y'all strings for y'all. Do what is right for our children already. Stand up for them. That's why you were put into this position. You're supposed to be standing up for our kids. We shouldn't have to be fighting the school board for a basic right to breathe fresh air. There are way bigger problems out there right now we should be focusing on, not this. You know, I truly hope and pray that y'all end this asinine behavior swiftly for the sake of our children, because at the end of the day, they're the only ones that are being hurt by this. They're being negatively affected by all of this nonsense, so enough's enough already. We need to return this back to the parents. It's up to them. It's their choice. So with that, thank you.
Anna Sherman.
Hello. So, I am a teacher at Northside, so some of you might recognize me, I recognize some of you, and I felt it was important to come out tonight because I want you guys to know that Northside AFT does not speak for all the teachers. Their Facebook post about their union win regarding masks was really honestly what lit the fire for me to speak out. They do not speak for all of us. Dr. Woods was actually on my campus a few months ago and had really great things to say about our campus, and I agree with him. I like our campus. And a lot of the teachers choose not to wear masks. And I actually think that that is one of the things that makes our campus so successful is we can actually teach. So let me get on track here because I'll lose my track of time. So I teach first grade. The importance of reading in first grade, you guys, I don't even have to tell you how many reading levels we have to jump up in first grade, and there was just one more added on, as you already know. And you also know about this wonderful teaching academy that we're doing that tells us all about how there's a science of teaching reading, which we already knew, but we're doing this reading academy. Part of it is we're talking about the phonics, talking about the articulation, and just the modeling of the mouth. And it is all day. I do not teach reading for a portion of the day. It is all day. It is when I am walking my kids down the hallway and we're reading. It is constant, all day, explicit instruction. They need to see my mouth. I need to hear them. I need to hear them clearly. And asking them, pull your mask down so I can hear you, that's not, talk about mask safety, that's not safe. For me to constantly put my hands on my mask to pull it down, that's not safety. For them to do it, that's not safety. I have 2 students in my class that are already identified for speech, and I have 2 more that are in need of speech interventions. We want to talk about developmental delays. I can attest to that. We have some delays. I cannot perform my job effectively. I can't. I cannot provide the interventions that I need to provide for them because speech is all about looking at your mouth, hearing the sounds clearly. I can't do that. You guys are hindering what I can do. My main objective is the students. And according to the teachers, we have a responsibility to advocate for our kids. It is domain 4. There's a responsibility to advocate for our student needs. I'm here. That's what I'm doing. I could talk to you about it as a parent, etc., but I'm advocating for my student needs. They need to see my mouth, and I need to hear them clearly.
Thank you.
Hernando Arce.
Am I allowed to take off my mask to talk? Thank you. Okay, my name is Hernando Arce for the record. And as I entered the building this afternoon for the public meeting in a public building that we taxpayers pay for, I was accosted by some of your reps and the police. They're about to throw me out for not wearing a mask. I haven't worn a mask in 2.5 years. So I was a little bit taken back by that, to be honest with you. Wasn't expecting that. But you gotta fight your battles. And me being up here talking is a battle I have to fight. I wore the mask. Okay, I triple masked for you guys, if you haven't noticed. I was triple masked. But, just for the record, me speaking out here in a public school board meeting, I just hope that the Attorney General in Washington, D.C. does not target me as a domestic terrorist like he had his FBI go after Americans in the past few months have. So I'm putting myself at risk here by being here. I don't want to be considered a domestic terrorist. You woke up these mama bears. This pack, it's not going anywhere. These mama bears are not going anywhere, guys. and I'm a Papa Bear. Actually, actually, my niece goes to Garcia Middle School here, and she has special needs too, and she hates wearing the mask. And actually, she doesn't wear the mask until you started with this mandate a couple of days ago. And I think there's a couple of doctors on this panel, and which is surprising because I'd like to see, if you're doctors, if you can show me one randomized controlled trial showing any absolute risk reduction in the effectiveness of wearing a mask. I'm sure, a doctor, you have all the websites, it's your profession, you can show it to me. But let me help you. There is none, because there is not one study that shows that it works. The only one studies you're going to get from Google is from these scientists and doctors that are paid off by big pharma. See, we're not the virus, guys. I know you look at us with disdain, and I know you think me wearing a mask was kind of stupid like that with my three masks. But if you guys were really serious about this COVID-19, then our borders wouldn't be open with 2 million illegal aliens coming in here without a mask and without vaccines. If this was a real serious pandemic, the Monte Carlo cocktails that were available at Freeman Coliseum are now gone. The government is hoarding them. Let's go, Brandon. If this was a serious pandemic, they wouldn't have fired all those teachers and nurses that had natural immunity, which is superior to any vaccine. You wouldn't have fired them if this was a serious virus. And we all know now, of course, not 2 years later, that it's a 99.5% survival rate if you're under 50 years old. See, shame on you for trying to trick me the first time. But now we've woken up these packs of bears here, these mama bears. Shame on you. So we're not going to be falling asleep now. We're awake. We're changing the narrative. And I don't know how you guys voted for this to mandate again.
Sir?
Yes. I'm off?
Yes, sir.
Oh, man. All right. Well, shame on all of you for voting for this mandate. You're the problem, not us. Where's my mask?
Jade Texera.
Good afternoon. My name is Jay Texeda, and I have been a student of Northside Independent School District for over 4 years. I'm now continuing my education at the University of Incarnate Word, and I'm here reading this on the behalf of my mother, Jamie Marroquin, who was not able to enter this building today to give you this 3-minute spiel. I saw a Facebook post the other day that made me finally understand Northside Independent School District's position on mandates. NISD does not answer to the parents. NISD, its board members, and superintendent answer to the unions. One in particular, Northside AFT. On the Facebook page of Northside AFT is this picture.
Ma'am, I need you to speak with the board.
All right, and this statement. Since we returned from winter break, NAFT has been advocating for a mask mandate to help slow the spread of this COVID surge. Although we would have liked to see this happen sooner, we are encouraged by this decision the district has made. Northside AFT looks forward to working with the district leadership to encourage the community and staff to wear their masks so we can slow the spread of COVID-19 and the surge of this Omicron cases in our city. What a spit in the face to all the parents of Northside on both sides of this issue. This board, along with Brian Woods, have made it very clear. Northside does not work with, doesn't work for, and does not answer to these parents. They take their directives and guidance from school unions and from a former Planned Parenthood abortionist with no children, Dr. Junda Wu. The seven-member board, along with Brian, definitely don't answer to the governor of Texas nor the Texas Education Agency. On January 7, 2022, TEA provided updated health guidance, which includes the governor's Executive Order 38. This guidance reads, per EO 38, school systems cannot require students or staff to wear a mask. EO 38 addresses government-mandated face coverings in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. School systems must allow individuals to wear a mask if they choose to do so. Choose. What a novel concept. Is choose even in NISD's vocabulary anymore? I don't believe it is. Because although I choose to be here and I choose to speak, and NISD chooses to not allow me to speak because my choice, my voice, does not matter.
Jocelyn Marroquin.
My name is Jocelyn Mariquin. I asked my mom if I could come with her this time. I want you to hear how being forced to wear a mask has made me feel. I feel like us teens and kids should not grow up living under pressure and forced to wear something on our faces. It is not normal, but I feel like you are trying to make it normal, and I don't want to wear it. But the teachers and principals at school are forcing me to, but I don't understand why. For me, the mask has done nothing but cause anxiety, and I hate not being able to see my friends smile. It makes it hard in school to communicate with teachers, especially when learning Spanish. And wearing a mask makes me have pimples all over my face and mouth and nose. It's very embarrassing. When I put on a mask, I start to feel nervous. My anxiety is already bad enough, but putting on a mask makes it even worse. It is hard for me to breathe, and I feel like I'm having a panic attack. I can't understand why my teachers aren't letting me and my friends just be kids. You have been treating my mom, Jamie Mariquin, like she is a bad person or a criminal just because she would not wear a mask. It really hurts to see her being treated unfairly and like she's a bad person. And then to stop my volleyball games just because she's a criminal, just because you say she's a criminal or a threat because she doesn't wear a mask is unbelievable to me. My mom was not hurting or bothering anyone when she was at my games, so why have her removed like she is a school shooter with 3 cops surrounding her? It is not fair and going way too far. I can't believe how badly you have treated her and that you think she's a bad person. My mom is the most hardworking and honest person you will ever meet. Please stop mandating masks. Make it a choice. And please allow my mom to come to me and my sister's games without having to ask for permission or being taken out by the school police.
Matt Durham.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Matthew Durham, and I'm here again to speak out against mask mandates. Omicron, the newest variant of COVID, is unstoppable. The daily new cases for Omicron are 5 times higher than that of any other variant of COVID during their peaks. Omicron defeats vaccines, and Omicron defeats masks. There is no protection against Omicron. We have seen prominent politicians get Omicron, and we have seen the most diligent mask-wearing, face-shielding homebodies get Omicron. I personally have tested positive for Omicron on the 1-year anniversary of my fully vaccinated status. My brother has tested positive. My triple vaccinated parents have tested positive. My wife and my children have all contracted and recovered from Omicron. Everyone in the world will get Omicron, and according to all available data, a majority of Americans have already contracted the virus. If you mistake my tenor for doom and gloom, everything I stated is good news. Omicron has a fraction of the fatality rate of Delta or the original strain and is bringing natural immunity to the vaccinated and unvaccinated alike. We're about a month into the Omicron wave, and daily deaths remain low, less than half of Delta, despite 5 times the daily caseload. The virus, as expected, has mutated to become more transmissible and less deadly. This is phenomenal. The hospitals are not overwhelmed. There is no doom on the horizon. The pandemic is over and has been for some time now. COVID has become a seasonal flu. With all this good news, we still find ourselves in this room again, fighting the same public policy that has failed the first, second, and third waves of COVID. The absolute definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. The temporary mask mandate that is known to spike carbon dioxide levels in the blood of our children above the allowable levels of OSHA. The mask mandate that has set our children back years in social development because they can't read facial expressions. The mask mandate that has deprived our children of their youthful innocence, their ability to live, without fear of a pandemic that never threatened children in the first place. I call on Dr. Woods and the Northside Independent School District Board of Trustees to rescind this mask mandate. Thank you.
Malik, I believe it's Dulett.
I would like you to think about these words, what these words have in common. Persecute, oppress, tyrannize, browbeat, intimidate, coerce, domineer, pressure. Do you realize that all of these words can be interchanged with the word bully? That is exactly what you have become to our children. Unlike this board, I have a zero tolerance for this action. This school board is the very definition for abuse of power. You have either become so controlled by fear or drunk on power, but either way, it needs to end now. Your power is co-signed by parents, and without our co-signature, you will lose all your power. I would like to remind the board that never in history has the correct side been the side to push segregation, support discrimination, strip away human rights, or force medical experiments against someone's consent. These have all been correctly considered crimes and injustices, making it necessary to create laws and regulations against such behavior. Yet here we are watching this board commit these violations, using fear and coercion to bully both parents and children into compliance. You all claim to be following the science from a man who claims to be science himself. The same man who has proven on multiple occasions to have little to no regard for human life, who puts the journey of science above that of ethics, who has a history of experimenting on orphan HIV children with known dangerous and toxic drugs, on innocent children who didn't have a voice or someone to advocate for them, abusing his authority and not following safety or consent protocols, similar to the kind of experiments that prompted the Nuremberg trials. This is the man you look to for science. This is the man you are entrusting with our children's health and well-being. The time has come where you must humble yourselves for the sake of our children. Put your pride aside and finally admit you took ill advice from people wrongly trusted. You need to correct your path and get back to the job you have been given, which is education. You need to return what you have hijacked and put medical decisions back to where it belongs, in the hands of the parents. Please remember, no one is stopping anyone from choosing to take part in a medical experiment, but only asking to be able to decline being part of that experiment. This is a basic human right, and denying this is a violation of our human rights. Thank you.
Polly McDonald.
Good evening. My name is Polly McDonald. I am the chapter chair of Moms for Liberty Bear County, and I have 2 daughters in Northside schools. There are many reasons why people should be speaking up at board meetings that are far more important than this topic. I'm incredulous that we are revisiting this again, considering what Texas law is and TEA guidance is. So I am asking on behalf of all parents in Northside who feel they do not have a voice to stop the mask mandate. Aside from the hard data that shows masks do not stop viral transmission, there is a more ominous threat to our children from wearing masks all day. Vinay Prasad is a hematologist oncologist, associate professor of epidemiology and biostatistics at the University of California, San Francisco. That was a lot. And he wrote an op-ed for the January 19th issue of Tablet in which he states, quote, "Masking is now little more than an appealing delusion. It arms us with a visible symbol that communicates our commitment to minimizing the pandemic's damage. It makes some of us feel empowered by giving us something we can do in the face of a largely invisible threat. When the history books are written, we will not look wise or kind for insisting that kids and toddlers wear masks for hours on end year after year without ever testing this policy with controlled trials. We will look ignorant, cruel, fearful, and cowardly. We might even look worse than our primitive ancestors who, when faced with great plagues, engaged in all sorts of bizarre, superstitious behavior, but which rarely included making kids suffer the most, end quote. I ask you to consider the damage mask wearing has done to students, including our special education population. As a mom to an autistic teenager, I cannot tell you the confusion and damage that has been done to her in the last 2 years from the delays that she may never regain. There are countless physicians, scientists, teachers, and counselors who documented to the public via major news outlets the developmental delays and mental health struggles happening in schools due to mask wearing. We must do better. We cannot go backwards. I realize that there are outside organizations pushing relentlessly to protect their teacher members, and those organizations believe this decision that you have made is a union win. But we are here for the hundreds of families and teachers that simply ask for you to consider the real data and to understand that this is a loss for children. Please end the mask mandate. Thank you.
Ms. Freeman and members, that concludes citizens to be heard.
Okay, thank you. We thank you all for bringing comments to the board. Next item on the agenda is consent agenda. Is there a motion to come before the board?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve consent agenda items. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is curriculum and instruction, mid-year ESSER updates.
Yes, good evening, President Freeman, Dr. Woods, and Board of Trustees. I'll be providing information from a 6-month review on our implementation of ESSER funds. As you're aware, ESSER funds are intended to mitigate challenges from the global pandemic. ESSER 1 was intended to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the virus. ESSER 2 extended ESSER 1's purpose to include mitigation of the impact on students' social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs. And ESSER 3 focuses on safely reopening and sustaining operation of schools while continuing to address the impact of coronavirus on students. Northside was allocated $172.9 million in ESSER 3 funds, and we'll have those to use through September of 2024. If you recall, there was a requirement that we allocate at least 20% of the ESSER funds towards direct student supports, which our application had more than 60%. As a reminder, here are the areas where ESSER expenditures are allowable. And you've seen this exact slide before in multiple presentations. The first is for academic supports to address learning loss. That's the area that you need to have at least 20% allocations, and that actually represents the largest part of our implementation. The second area that you can expend these dollars on are for what we call whole child or wraparound supports. And then the last is for health and safety, to mitigate the spread of COVID and to take care of things where you can safely reopen schools and have students in them. We've identified some celebrations and challenges over the last 6 months. Just a couple quick celebrations. Some of these we've talked about in academics. We have seen passing rates dramatically improve the first grading period and also the second grading period. We've been able, with these ESSER funds, to provide more students learning tree at a tuition-free way. We're implementing and providing better service to our students who are receiving dyslexia services through Orton Gillingham, which is a program that is specifically focused on students in reading. And you'll see other items on the list. You'll see one, Texas Reading Academies. You're going to see that actually on a celebration and a challenge because it's actually both. The training is exceptional. The time that it takes and kind of the shortened implementation is really, really tough. If you take a look over on the challenge side, we have struggled in Northside, and actually it's a state and nationwide problem. We have struggled to fill some of the positions that we wrote into ESSER. We've also struggled to fill some regular positions in classrooms. So as you know, we've talked to you guys several times. We have prioritized ensuring that every classroom has a high-quality teacher. So in some cases, we had positions in ESSER that we did not pull people off campuses to fill. Another challenge has been some state mandates. House Bill 4545 reared its head around May. And again, the idea of House Bill 4545, which is intense tutoring for students who have not met standard on the state test, the idea is good. Some of the rules around it and the time frame with which the state requires us to implement has been challenging. All of this has added up to fatigue. It has added up to higher absentee numbers among our students. You'll notice on the celebration side, student attendance liaisons. We started school, then we continued, and we really saw growth in our attendance and the work of these liaisons. Then when we came back for second semester, we've had some struggles. But as Dr. Wood said, we're starting to see that turn. So one of the last pieces, when we were trying to think, okay, how do we encapsulate some of the challenges? And the best way we could think of just to describe it is there's still so many unknowns. As soon as we start planning and moving in a direction, something pops up that we didn't anticipate, which we're thinking is the new normal.
Janice, before you leave that page, okay, so required reading academy training, and I'm really interested in finding out more about that. You don't have to go into huge detail, but I do want to know more about that if we can get that on academics. I'd like to understand what our first grade teacher is experiencing and what exactly that is. So if you can just briefly, what is the Reading Academy training? How is it required? How is it being implemented on our campuses? And what is the expectation being put on our teachers?
Yes, the Reading Academies is a state mandate that every teacher and every principal at the elementary level up through third grade is required to have certain pieces of training that run along all the basic building blocks of literacy. We've actually, so
this is something coming from TEA, from
Yes.
the last biennium's legislation?
Correct.
Actually comes from House Bill 3 2 sessions ago. But it is in statute.
Okay.
And they actually delayed, the state actually delayed implementation. And so it is training that administrators, elementary administrators must attend, teachers must attend, and they do it on their own time.
60 hours.
Okay, so we need to talk about that. So that's something, and it's not on the agenda right now for us to really be able to discuss that. But I do want us to come back to that, and we need to look at that, particularly the burden that we're putting on our teachers. And I recognize that it's a state mandate, but I do think that we need to look at outside the box of how it can be implemented and really look at particularly right now what we're doing, if it's something that can be put off. And I'm sure, Brian, I know that there's a lot in relation to this that we're not aware of, but I do want us to come back and take a look at it.
Yeah, it's a good conversation to have. There's not a lot of wiggle room, but we can talk about what there is.
Okay.
Janice,
you.
can I ask a piggyback question? It was 60 hours, but not during the school day, not during early release or professional development or?
Correct. Well, we did some sessions this summer where teachers were compensated for their time for some of the training in the summer. We'll do some training next summer, but we are not pulling teachers out of classrooms to attend.
And are they compensated for this time during the year?
Currently, no, but we actually just talked about a proposal to look at some compensation for the hours that they're spending beyond the hours that we give them, other times where they could work on this work.
So could ESSER funds pay for that?
Is that?
Potentially, yeah. We have our ESSER allocated on paper, but that's certainly something, we're already in those conversations about the compensation, additional compensation, if that was something that we were able to do for teachers.
I mean, the state has had mandates forever that we've had to put up with that were unfunded mandates. But that's ludicrous that they want our teachers to do 60 hours of unpaid training. Janice, that's not right.
This is statewide, and it is the reality.
Then let's have that discussion, and let's
Yes,
talk about
please.
the ESSER fund piece of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next slide, it goes into a little bit more detail about when we talked about one of the challenges with staffing. So there are 273 positions that are allocated in ESSER 3. As of mid-December, we had filled 210 of those. So that's about a 77% fill rate. What you see in the next slide is going to show it clearer, but what you see in that circle graph, if you'll go back real quick, the circle graph, the different colors there indicate the category of staff. So if you look, the big blue, that's Learning Tree. We wrote Learning Tree staff. That is the largest piece of the pie. Then, of course, you see the pre-K staff. Excuse me, in the red next to the blue, that is due to our pre-K expansion. And then in the yellow, you see the clinical assistants that we added, which, by the way, that also was in the celebration column.
Can you explain? I'm sorry, I don't remember what the clinical assistants do.
They're helping the nurses, providing additional support for nurses at campuses. Yes, yeah. And a whole host of things, but that has been a real popular one that we've gotten a lot of feedback. Okay, Monica, the next slide. So this basically shows you in narrative form what the previous slide showed you in pie graph. So the number to the right is the total number of staff from that category that we wrote into the grant. The number to the left is the number that had been hired. So you can tell here that we've struggled with Learning Tree. There's high turnover with the Learning Tree staff. That's not unusual, but the numbers are a little bit better now, but that still is an area that we struggle. You'll take a look at...
Janice, real quick, on the Learning Tree, who pays their salary? Does Northside pay it, or is it in combination with something else?
We pay it. We have...
So did they not get a pay increase when we rose, like subs and some other things,
The only adjustment we've made in the current school year was to substitutes.
To subs, okay.
But these are Northside employees.
But so they're working for the regular pay they did before all of this?
Mm-hmm. And
Like
if I recollect...
$10 an hour or something like that?
Within the last 5 years, I do believe the hourly rate has been raised, because I remember that was something Mr. Schmidt had brought forward.
Yeah, if you could find out what their hourly. And I know you went through the list. Did we not have I know I see counselors there, but, and maybe it's under student service facilitators. Did we have additional support for supporting our students with social emotional or?
Oh, yes, had a whole host of things, and those are within mostly contracts and services, such as the SEED teams, the social worker, the diagnostician that works with CIS.
So that wasn't part of the ESSER funds, that's part of the normal Northside?
No, that was also written into the ESSER funds, but it's
Okay.
not specific positions that you see here.
Okay,
It's
and then
more
last
in
question,
services.
what is student service facilitators?
The student services facilitator is specifically at our middle schools, and so that individual is working with 504, is working with small groups, is helping to relieve teachers of some of the things that the teachers were doing so they can tutor for House Bill 4545. So that student services facilitator is only at the middle school level.
Okay, thank you.
So within the description of the ESSER funds, at the very beginning, Dr. Ridgely had talked to us about exactly, some of the things that were being done within her wheelhouse. So where do those positions fit within this?
Well, if you see, you see some additional counselors. So like the SEEDS team is a combination of a diagnostician, of which we have, a social worker, and then also our partners in CIS.
And SEED falls under?
The SEEDS team, the social and emotional ED, I can't remember the acronym.
Where on this?
It's not on here. It's not a list of positions. It's more of
Those
a
services are
contract.
contracted with communities and schools, and that's why you don't see them here, because they're not Northside employees.
Okay, but Brian, I guess my question though is, I was very comfortable when Dr. Ridgely explained what this was going to encompass, what her group was going to be doing in relation to the social emotional. So what does it look like from a staffing position for CIS then? So if we're having this problem with our positions, what is CIS doing in relation to the SEED teams and all the other things that we talked about, for which I was very supportive and felt very comfortable with when Dr. Ridgely had explained it. But if we're seeing these numbers, what numbers are CIS having, and would we be better served to try to figure out the staffing piece not within the context of CIS? Because I have a feeling you're going to tell me their numbers are not as good as ours.
I see Dr. Ridgely has come to the mic, so is there something that you'd like to inform us about?
Yes.
That would pertain to Ms. Chumley's questions?
Yes. So the SEEDS teams are all fully staffed and working on the clinical mental health side. What CIS is struggling with is hiring social workers. And so what they've done is, when we came originally, we had a paired team, which was a licensed professional counselor and a social worker. Social worker doing the follow-up care. So since they're struggling hiring on the social work side, we've put two LPCs with a social worker. So the follow-up care is being covered by the social worker.
LPC licensed professional counselor?
LPC licensed professional counselor, sorry, yes, ma'am.
Oh. Okay, run that by one more time.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and
I'm
just,
slow on the uptake
I
here.
think our questions are bleeding together, only because I thought that was part of not contracted services, but would be a part of Northside staff now, and that ESSER funds would help support that. So I get the contracted services, but I also thought we were adding additional staff. So anyway.
I guess what my concern is that I don't want this all just on the shoulders of CIS. I mean, because, I'll share with you, I particularly think Communities in School is a great organization, and we've had some very positive things. That said, there's also been areas where we haven't had the best experience with Communities in Schools, and I know that those are anecdotal, some of them, and some of them are very specific circumstances that I really think fall into that 80-20 kind of rule. But I am worried about that. And I want us to kind of stay on top of that, Brian.
Yeah, I think from a supervision standpoint, that conversation came up a lot when we first talked about this, and I think the board was comfortable with how these folks were integrating with Northside staff and being supervised by Northside staff. Dr. Harrell, I can't remember a conversation around that specifically other than this one that we're having, where we were saying this, we're going to count on a trusted partner to help us with this work. We know we've got money to be able to afford it for 3 years, and who knows, if good fortune, maybe you'll even a little longer. But that's the way I recall the conversation.
So let me just ask so Dr. Ridgely, who oversees, since they're not our employees, they're community and schools, but who oversees evaluations in relation to their staffing? And where's the oversight on our side in relation to their staff and their interaction with our kids?
Sure. So Jessica Weaver, who's the CEO, and myself and Mary Libby. So Mary Libby is the Director of Counseling. So we supervise the SEEDS team staff members, and they're divided by cluster, and then we have 2 CIS coordinators who are in the 2 kind of pseudo offices. So they have a campus, they office on a campus, although they're out on all campuses. And so we meet monthly, but we're also in communication much more frequently. If there's a concern that comes up, or we get a report with their data, what kiddos they're seeing, we don't get it detailed about the concern because there's some confidentiality to that, but what the follow-up is, how many sessions, what the follow-up care plan is. And so we've got great communication with communities and schools with Jessica, and then both the 2 coordinators that are assigned specifically to these programs with us.
Okay. And so if a red flag were to occur somewhere, our oversight is such that it would be a short period of time before that would be addressed.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Wait, I had one more question. I just want to be clear because I think it sounds like I wasn't clear. So we got a large portion of the ESSER funds is supposed to be for mental health support. And I'm just wanting, on this chart, it's just counselors that have now joined our Northside staff to support students. Everything else has been allocated to contracted services. Is that my understanding? Because I don't remember that conversation. I thought we were hiring additional personnel to help this issue at our campuses.
Yeah, I mean, my recollection is that's accurate, that what you just said is true.
With the addition of what you see on the screen, the counselors, 10 positions out of 12. So at the middle school level, we operate what's called a 0.5, a split allocation of counselors. And so with ESSER money, we were able to take that 0.5 allocation and make it a 3 counselor allocation at every middle school. So that's what you see in that didn't already have a 3-point allocation based on their student enrollment. So that's what you see in the counselor.
Okay. So no additional staff at elementary or high school?
So,
okay, then I totally misunderstood. So everything else is relegated to contracted services. Okay.
I do remember some of the conversation, although, it's been quite some time. I know that we were talking about recurring expenditures, and some of these people that we hire, we don't know that, we all know here that ESSER funds are limited over a period of time. And I remember talking about when we hired these people to help us, that they were told that that their job would not continue. So I guess I wonder how much that has entered into the decision about contracting.
Oh, absolutely.
That was definitely a part of the decision originally to contract. The other reason to do that is because we had a partner who's got a proven model that we've seen work in another district, and we were excited to take advantage of that. But clearly, the whole thing with grant funds is you have to put, when you post a job with grant funds, you've got to put an end date, right, to when you expect the money to go away. That only attracts a certain kind of person, right, who's willing to stay for 2 years or 3 years and then know that while they may have a job, it won't be exactly perhaps the job that they applied for. That is a reason to consider contracted services in this kind of area. And we anticipate that as we get closer to the end of that grant, closer to the funds expiring, folks will start to jump to more permanent, within the system and outside of the system, what they perceive to be more permanent positions. So the notion of contracting in this space is, seems like a logical one.
Thank you, Ms. Ridgely.
Thank you.
So if you take a look at the next slide, one of the requirements of the 6-month review for ESSER funds is to review and revise the plan that is actually called the Return to In-Person Instruction and Continuity Plan. This plan outlines the implementation of ESSER and safety protocols to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. So we began receiving public comment on January 14th, and that closed January 24th via the district website. We had 253 responses, and we had those responses, and then we convened the FPAC, which is the Federal Program Advisory Council. That council has the required members that the state outlines. It has members from foster care. It has members from private school. It has community members, business leaders. It has all the different categories within the school district. And so that team convened and reviewed the 253 comments that we received from the public and revised the plan, and it has now been posted. Some of the themes of feedback in those 253 responses: one, they were very complimentary on the social and emotional supports that had been done. Some talked about specific things that they had seen for their child in their school. They said that they felt the district could do better in communicating about ESSER from kind of one source, that they're hearing things from maybe different places. And then they just emphasize that they want the district to continue to focus on the cleaning protocols, the sanitation processes that we use, not to let our guard down, so to speak. If you take a look at the slide after that, in addition to updating the plan, you have to ensure that you update your required postings. So that's actually a screenshot from our district website, and what you'll see on there in English and in Spanish, the updated return to school plan, the ESSER application, and the coronavirus response and supplemental appropriations requirement. Now, the next piece, not that other is not important to post the plan and all of that, this probably in our instructional world is the biggest piece. It's kind of the so what piece. So we have these additional dollars. We intentionally created a plan that put the majority of these dollars directly focused on students and student learning, whether it was directly focused on academics or if it was focused through building kind of the whole child with social and emotional supports. So the logical question then is it working? How do we know? Is the needle moving? So this slide shows what we've talked in academics about quite a bit. We have our processes of looking at data. We look at formative data continually. We look at beginning of the year data, which we call it BOI on our screeners in our mathematics and our science and our tools that we have. We're looking at mid-year data now, so we can compare what growth have we made, what growth have second graders made in reading since beginning of the year in August, and then when they took their middle of the year. Principals and central office staff are doing continual walkthroughs in classrooms to view instruction and get teacher feedback. We have our district benchmarks that have been implemented. So there's a whole host of things that we're looking at regularly. And then, of course, the summative is what you look at the end of the year. Yes, we look at STAR, but we also look at the end of the year screeners and all of that. I say that because these are our processes we have in place. This is not going to tell us if the SEEDS teams are working. So we cannot draw a direct line and say, oh, our failure rates are so better, it's because of the SEEDS team. Now, we do feel that we're getting some evidence that some of those are impacting it, but what I want you to see is the next slide, which is the plan we put in place for program evaluation. Monica, if you'll switch. This is what's going to help draw a more direct line between these large initiatives that we're implementing in ESSER and actually student learning. So a program evaluation is an extensive deep dive, gathering data from a variety of sources and a variety of kind of data to triangulate it to see what patterns and trends. So we plan to do full-fledged program evaluations on the largest initiatives that we have really laid out, that we feel like this is a key part of our strategy that we're using these funds. So this school year, and again, we've only been implementing some of these for just a few months, and some of it was slow going for a whole host of reasons. So starting this summer, we'll be conducting program evaluations on Brain Pop, which is an online intervention that we use with students, STEM Scopes, Dreambox, and then you see some of our SEL implementation, the Reconnect team, the SEEDS team. And so we will be bringing back specific data to you about what we're finding and recommendations, because the whole point of a program evaluation is to get the data and then you make a decision. Do you keep implementing? Do you stop implementing? Do you make some tweaks as you're going forward? The next slide shows you where we are this is where we were mid-December. So this is the year one ESSER budget. And so we've spent, at that time, nearly 21% of the budget. So you may think, oh my goodness, that means 80% we haven't spent. Well, there are several reasons why 80% is unspent. One is we're only halfway through the budget cycle. So we've got some large ticket pieces in the spring and the summer school that we know will be ones, certainly that we will be expending. We've had vacancies where that money is allocated in the budget for a position, but we don't have a person in that position. And also capacity. We've had some things that we haven't been able to get, that we placed an order, and it's something that's so backlogged that then we've backed up. We've had some slowdowns in trying to get different bids to go through the RFP process. So there have been some slowdowns that we typically have not had, which has impacted this. But again, we're halfway through the year. And as I mentioned before, when we talk about reading academies on ESSER, that certainly is something that we do have a plan to spend the funds. We want to make sure it's on what you guys decide.
Janice,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Carol.
On the slide before, I had one real quick question. Thank you, Ms. Chumley. On the SEL focus, are those the only things, Brain Pop, STEM Scopes, those are like interventions or their curriculum center?
Yeah, the main one, Dr. Harrell, on that is SEEDS teams, Reconnect team, Grab and Go. Those are going to be more the SEL.
Okay, I was curious about that. And those are the only things that we're going to be looking at to get feedback on how our kids are doing in a social emotional way
They're
in our schools?
Doing a full program evaluation, we'll be surveying students, we'll be surveying parents, we'll be looking at discipline data, attendance data, test data, so it's very comprehensive. And those are the large ticket items from this year that we're working on in SEL.
So I'm just curious, I'm wondering what of the schools, it seems like a lot of the burden of SEL is, or not burden, but program is, they're going on at the schools, and I'm not seeing some of the ones that I've been, people have shared neat things that are going on in their school that are helping their kids and their families with SEL. I'm not seeing them, and I guess maybe the individual schools or clusters of schools are doing their own thing, and I'm just curious because if they're having really good results in our surveys and our parents are saying, wow, we love the Happy Frog program at, Hope Elementary, it's not getting any kind of evaluation focus.
Yeah, for the district program evaluation, we'll be doing full-fledged program evaluations that's directly related to how we're expending the money with ESSER. But at the same time, through the action that you guys took, we now have a department that is whole child.
Right.
And that now has an IST. We have an SEL model that we're continually working on. We have SEL staff out in classrooms that are learning of those different pieces. We now have connected the whole discipline and restorative practices and those working on those pieces with the academic section. And
At
one thing
every
I wanted
school.
to mention, Dr. Hall, when we were talking about the staff, and although you don't see, SEL coordinator, the SEL model, we're working to integrate it in everything that we do. So when we talk about pre-K expansion, that is SEL. The actual curriculum that we use, part of what we're doing in pre-K, we've even created these cool-off spaces, these multi-sensory spaces for children that we've had before in environments where students are receiving special ed services, but we're now putting those in places for all children. So although sometimes you may see a position and it doesn't say SEL, we're really working with this department to infuse it as it's the way we are and the way we see the world. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that's a great way to say it. So thanks for that. And real quick, SEEDS teams, no, I know full-day pre-K is not we don't have pre-K at every school. Are SEEDS teams at every school, or?
We don't have them at every school.
They're by cluster, so we have a cluster for high school.
So by cluster, so they may be at one school one day and another school another day? Okay.
Okay, and so,
Do we know what clusters those are?
Yes, we have a name internally, and I can share that information.
Yeah, and we
I'm
can
sorry, I
include, if
couldn't
y'all want that in Friday letter,
Oh,
like a
okay.
list of the cluster schools where SEEDS teams are, we can give you an update of that.
Yeah, was there a rescheduled academics? I'm sorry, I know you were going to go over this at academics and we didn't get to have it.
Not yet. We had to reschedule 2 times in
Right.
January. Yeah, which was crazy. And then,
Right.
So hopefully in February, I'll get with Mr. Medina.
Thank you.
okay, SEL is social emotional learning,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, and STI is, Janice, I don't know all of your abbreviations, so what is STI? You said STI something, I don't know what that is.
I don't either. I'm not,
Yeah, I don't either.
I don't.
Okay, just try to expand on that, please, and not use all the abbreviations. Some of it I can follow, some of it I don't know what you're talking about with that on just some things. One thing I would like to know on this is when you're doing this evaluation, we're looking at how many kids this has touched too, right?
Yes, that is part of the evaluation.
Okay, because I would hate for us to be spending multiple millions of dollars on something, say a technology or a new program that's only going to benefit, say, 30 kids or something. I mean, so we're paying attention to that. That's part of the whole review process of what is approved on the ESSER funds, right?
Yeah, these represent large dollar items, and these represent district initiatives. So these don't represent, this is something a campus decided to do, or these represent part of a strategy where we
Okay.
actually have central office people trained on how to use it. So, yeah, exactly. And we'll see the usage rates. It'll be a very thorough examination.
I'm really excited to get the results
am
on
too.
some of this. I think that's great. I'm really glad that we're pursuing that. Thank you.
And so the next steps, so tonight we're doing the 6-month review. And again, I wish we could have talked about this prior because these are really good questions. We'll do a 12-month review. We're thinking that'll be September, maybe August, but what we want to have for you guys on the 12-month review is we want to have some results of the program evaluation. And then come to you and say, this is what we found, because part of the review, and especially at the 12-month review, is then what do we need to tweak? What do we need to stop doing, start doing, add more of, do less of? So it's at that time that we're hoping to have, some light as to the direction we need to go. And then we'll start September 1, year 2 of ESSER 3. And that's the update.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Jordan. And I know that when we do announce academics committee, I know that there's opportunities actually at the end of this meeting. If you would like something specific to be on academics, please let Dr. Woods know at that time.
I think that'd be a good place for us to put
Right.
the mandated reading academy.
Yes, I have, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Jordan. Next item on the agenda is the first reading of policy EHAA local.
That was a really good review, Janice.
Oh,
Thank
good,
you.
thank you, Ms. Gilman. So House Bill 1525 requires a lot of changes to school districts' local SHAC, or the School Health Advisory Council, how human sexuality curriculum materials are adopted, how parents are notified, how they consent to their students receiving that instruction. The House bill specifically states that districts must adopt a policy for establishing a process for adoption of human sexuality materials, and this policy must require the adoption of a resolution that says the SHAC will be convened for the purpose of making human sexuality curriculum material recommendations. I know it's been a while, but we talked about this quite a bit in October. There is so much in this House bill that we've actually created just different tables, and Naomi has been such a huge help to just check off some of these changes. So back in November, EHAA local was approved by you guys, and basically it says the SHAC brings a recommendation to the board as to what they believe the human sexuality instructional materials should be, and then the board is the one who approves them. So what we're bringing to you tonight are requirements of House Bill 1525-25, but these are in exhibits, and this has been recommended to us by TASB. So if you take a look at the first exhibit, Exhibit A, this is the resolution of the board to convene SHAC to recommend curriculum materials for human sexuality instruction. So you see this language here. It simply says that the board calls for SHAC to hold at least 2 public meetings on curriculum materials for sexuality instruction before adopting them, then recommending the curriculum materials that comply with the instructional content and requirements in law, and then present the SHAC's recommendation to the board at a public meeting. So you guys approving this resolution is required. If you take a look at the next exhibit, this is Exhibit B. One of the big changes with giving sexuality instruction or providing it to students is it's an opt-in, not an opt-out. And so before, if parents didn't have to, they would have to say, I want to be out, so more students received it. So this is a sample letter, and we did want it approved by you guys because this is what we're planning to use with parents. And what it describes here is we will fill in when the child's receiving human sexuality instruction, and the parents have to opt in with the consent. This is a big change that we want to make sure our parents know what it means. And then Exhibit C, there is another part of 1525 that we haven't talked about quite as much because we've talked a lot about human sexuality instruction, but this has to do with healthy relationships. So there also is a requirement for the board to adopt a resolution that they will convene SHAC, and for SHAC to recommend curriculum materials for healthy relationships. So this is separate and apart from human sexuality instruction, but you will see here that the requirements are the same. 2 meetings, public meetings must be held, materials must be recommended, and then the SHAC's recommendation will be presented to the board by May for implementation the next school year.
I've got a question, and it goes back historically in relation to the board and SHAC, and the last time that we had discussions on the human sexuality instruction. I don't know, so where, let me just use an example. What came to us as a recommendation had elements that our community absolutely would not in any manner have supported. And it was a prior superintendent who had them presented, but even his recommendation was for us not to accept it. And then they went back and it was a different discussion that came back. I really don't want to have or go through that kind of a discussion again. So when we're talking about the curriculum that they're going to be looking at, where are they getting that from? And I will tell you that the curriculum at that time that was looked at was a very liberal curriculum out of California, which was not suited for Texas standards or for our community standards in any manner. And so I'm concerned as to where is the recommendations for curriculum going to be coming from, who's reviewing it. I mean, I know they'll be reviewing it, but Janice, where does it come from? I don't want us, we've got enough on our plates. I don't want us in that situation of being put in that situation again. It was not good, and I don't want to go there again. So where does that come from, Brian?
Janice will have to answer the curriculum question. I think whatever you see will be, will have been reviewed thoroughly before you see it.
Okay.
Yeah, so currently we use Choosing the Best Path, and we use some locally developed curriculum. And I assure you, because I wasn't here, but I've heard tales of that years ago, I assure you that wouldn't come before this board. One thing to know is the health essential knowledge and skills are being revised. And as you know, we're currently, reviewing instructional materials up for adoption that we'll be bringing you.
Right.
So we will follow the district protocol. We will follow the state standards that have been adopted and follow really our local policy that's in place. And we've had a good track record with what we've used. And so what House Bill 1525-25 has put in is they put in even more checkpoints.
Okay.
To where
Let's just make sure that we keep our community in
Absolutely.
in mind when we're talking about this.
I think this is still an opportunity. There's some, this particular EHA local is reflective of legal. Is that correct? And I listened to the State Board of Ed debate on instructional materials and what they were going to approve. It was quite lengthy. A lot of discussion, and from what I remember, though, regarding the health piece on it, they only approved one textbook. So I don't know how much leeway that we have regarding textbook, but only one textbook was approved.
There is only one textbook approved. That doesn't prevent us, if we thought it in the best interest of our students and the community, from using other materials, whether they be locally developed or purchased from elsewhere. But what you say about a textbook is accurate.
Was just asking, just
Yeah,
make sure we
and
keep that in mind.
And what I would like to in the future, so I know that we have to record our SHAC meetings, and those have to be available. In the future, can you let us know what those discussions are and when they take place, in case we wanted to
We can do that.
listen?
Well, for sure on the public meetings, I would like the board to know when those public meetings are being held in relation to this.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. I believe that minutes also have to be created, so that's another opportunity to review that material.
Okay. This is, I'm sorry, is this first reading?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Blunt?
Yeah, just real quick, one minor. By the way, I do remember Melissa. I think there were some other changes that occurred shortly thereafter too, from the time period you're talking about, just in general. So yeah, I definitely remember what you're talking about. But what I was going to say, just a real small point on item 1 and 3, and item 1 and 3 in two places says public meetings, and then 3 is actually, I know it says public meeting, but I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be may mean a board meeting. We may want to differentiate there, just so people don't think that it could be outside of a board meeting on number 3. It's a small point.
Oh, yes, that's an easy fix.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that's
Mr.
all I have.
Blunt.
Thank you.
Yes, we'll make that change for second reading.
One thing I'll ask, this is first reading, one thing I'll ask the staff to do is remind me that when this comes back, that these get broken into multiple actions by the board, since they're not exactly the same item. If we could do that, just in case a trustee wanted to pull one in particular and discuss it further.
All right. Any other questions? Next item on the agenda, our Soundfield systems proposal.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Freeman. As Tracy's coming up, she's our Director of Student Services and is going to really talk about something that I didn't know anything about until I learned more, and I think it's going to be a huge advantage for our teachers.
Good evening. Our date on there is January 10th because we were going to present this at academics. And so I would love to bring a sample to the next academics if you guys would like. So I would just like to talk to you about a proposal for us to possibly purchase some classroom sound systems. And this, we are working very closely with our district audiologist because she obviously is a better expert at this than I am. But this has really been a dream of hers to have these in our classroom. We have them sporadically right now for students that are hearing impaired. There may be a teacher that uses it in that classroom. We also have some classrooms across our district where teachers really wanted it and they had the PTA purchase it for them. So we do have them sporadically placed in our district. So what is a classroom sound system? It's a mobile device that improves the clarity of the teacher's voice in addition to amplification. So the big difference between this type of sound system and just a microphone is it's really going to increase the clarity, which is very important when we're talking about learning language, when teachers are modeling sounds, phonetic sounds, so that kids can acquire that. So you can see the little image there. That is the receiver that plugs in and sits on a bookshelf at the back of the classroom. It's extremely light. And the teacher would wear, and this is what I would like to come to academics in February just to show you so you can see what they look like. It's a magnet necklace that sits around their neck, and it's a microphone that sits right here. And that's the extent of the system. It's mobile. That was one of the benefits of this particular product. And so some of the other benefits of a classroom sound system, it's going to improve language acquisition, like I had just talked about. It's going to reduce the vocal strain and fatigue on the teachers so that they're not having to project their voice as much. So hopefully it would save them a little bit of energy by the end of the day. Help with some routine classroom sounds that impair the student's ability to hear, such as the air conditioning system. Maybe the playground is right outside the classroom. Hallway noise, just movement of furniture, and just kiddos moving around. And 75% of the day of our students is listening to instructions or listening to language in the classroom. And so we know that hearing it clear and with correct volume is important for our students. And so it would also mitigate some other factors affecting auditory perception, such as just the neurological development of a child.
How many classrooms do we have in Northside?
Roughly 7,000.
So our proposal, so this is an ESSER expenditure, if it's approved. So what we looked at was 3,800 units, which is one for every one of our elementary classrooms, for a total of 3.9 million. The way we would like to roll this out, we already talked to principals about this, got their feedback, some teachers. Our audiologist, Mallory, she's been boots on the ground about this, really wanting to make this a reality for the last couple of years. So she's really talked to a lot of teachers about this and really had a lot more interest at the elementary level versus the secondary. So we chose to go with elementary. We chose every single classroom, and we know that there may be some classrooms or some teachers that choose not to use it. And then we would like to maybe use those extra ones at the secondary level. But our thought is we'll get some in the spring, use it at several of our elementary campuses and get feedback from those teachers. And we've talked to some principals, and they're talking to their teachers to see if they would be interested in doing this in the spring so that we can get some good information about training and just pitfalls before we distribute it to every elementary school. And then our hope would be to distribute it for the 22-23 school year at our elementary campuses.
And we're talking about every elementary campus classroom?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct.
But we don't know yet if our teachers are going to want to use this, or how many of them. Have we done any kind of a survey to ask how many of them would like it? Do we have any kind of background on that it makes a difference from an academic performance standard? Do we have any of that? I'm hesitant to spend $3.9 million on 3,800 units, truthfully, without any kind of data underneath it as to, will this be something that our teachers will look at as just another thing that they have to adapt to or use?
Certainly.
I mean, have we talked to our teachers? Do we know if they even want this? And do you have any data that shows the efficacy of using this in a classroom outside of hearing impaired students, which I'm not saying that's not important.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But before we do this, what is the background data that you have on it?
Well, we haven't obviously done a large-scale data in our district because we haven't implemented it. We do have it sporadically across our campuses, and then just the research that the companies produce. Using the systems.
So it's vendor-prepared research?
Some of it, yes.
From the individuals that are wanting to sell us the product?
So Tracy, what we could do is buy a much smaller number and create a larger scale pilot and decide whether or not to purchase a larger number, yes?
Yes, absolutely. And we also reached out, Sci-Fair has implemented it at Sci-Fair, so we've talked to some counterparts there. Northeast has implemented it, and I believe it was Dallas ISD. And so we did talk to them. And the reason we didn't, go grander scale is because we do want to give people the option. We don't want this to be a mandatory, but we do want to provide some training and some background and the benefits of it, and allow teachers and campus principals the flexibility on how they would use it.
I guess I would just be more comfortable if we had offered that data first before we spent $3.9 million, because there's lots of other things I can think about for us to spend on ESSER funds for. I think I would be more comfortable knowing that our teachers are interested in it, and really more than anything, I just don't want us putting one more thing on our teachers that they feel, oh my God, here there's something else here now. They want us to use this technology without us telling them up front first, this is something we're looking at. We think it would be effective. We think it would help you with voice fatigue, vocal fatigue. Mm-hmm. I want to know our teachers want this before we allocate this money. I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
That's just the way that I feel about it.
Dr. Harrell?
Yeah, and I really want to understand the benefits on our students as well, and before we look at rolling ahead, and maybe talking to some of the districts, and maybe they have a little more longitudinal data
Absolutely.
that is student-focused.
And I would love for you to see one and just kind of experience it. So bringing it to maybe academics in February might be helpful also.
That'd be great. And then the total expenditure for the pilot is 3.9 million, or total expenditure for our district?
Total. That would be the total.
Okay.
Correct. If we were to do one for every single elementary classroom. That's where the number 3,800 came from.
Okay, but 39 million for every elementary classroom.
3.9.
3.9 million, thank you. Sorry, I'm trying to buy people.
Trustee Saldana?
You said that we're already using some of these in some classrooms now?
Yes.
How are they doing with the mask? Have they figured out whether it makes a difference? Because the way I speak with a mask and the way I speak without a mask could be different.
Very different.
It's going to amplify it. It would amplify it, just like right now talking into the microphone. So that's what the teacher would have in the classroom. So it would really help with their projection, with their fatigue, because it sits right here. So it would really help with that, with the mask.
So we've tried
Absolutely.
it with the mask and without the mask, and the teachers who are using it like it.
You're using it the same. I haven't actually asked them before and after the mask, but we do have teachers that have used it before, because it's been in our district, in our classrooms, and then now that the mask mandate is there, so they are using it now with the mask. But that could be something that we could interview them, but it does help with the projection and the fatigue, especially with the mask.
Is it the teachers that are using it now, is it for regular ed classrooms, or is it classroom specific for hearing impaired, or?
Both. We've had some teachers that reached out that wanted it purchased for them, and so they had PTAs purchase it for them. There have also been lots of articles right now where teachers are buying these on their own, and we have bought a couple cheaper versions just because we wanted to test those out, and that's what I've read articles about. Teachers are buying them on their own because they're having to wear the mask. But yes, we do have general ed classrooms, like our collaborative classrooms, that are using them in our schools right now.
Do we know the lifespan?
The lifespan of the entire unit, I do not know the lifespan of the entire unit. The microphone is 2 years, and then you replace the battery. That's the only thing you replace, is the battery on the microphone.
See, Corinne,
Trace,
to your question, I'm wondering if teachers aren't using it because of the mask.
Right.
Versus,
You know,
do they want to use it with?
because I agree with you, when
Yeah.
it comes to reading, they need, especially the little kids, they need to see the lips.
I agree.
And that would help with the, just the distance, the further you are away from your teacher, that sound, and so it would help project that with or without the mask.
I would be interested in finding out how many teachers really would want one before we made that kind of an expense.
Yeah,
Tracy, I have a
absolutely.
question real quick.
Yes.
When you mentioned the students that would benefit from it, you had mentioned there were certain students that had hearing impairments, am I correct?
Yes,
Wouldn't some of those students already have hearing aids?
They may.
And do we know they're identifiable, that we know that they would be in this certain classroom that could benefit from that?
Those students may already have this unit in their classroom, because that might be part of their services that they receive.
Right.
So they those are the majority of the classrooms in our district that are using it. That is the purpose right now, because we haven't purchased it for them, but there are some teachers that just know about these and reached out and asked for funding to get them on their own.
You're saying you're saying that you purchase for the students or for the classroom and the students in the classroom? Is that what I'm hearing?
If a student is
Hearing impaired?
yes,
Right.
then part of their services would be their teachers
Oh, their teachers.
would have to wear the microphone to help
Really?
benefit their hearing.
So they wouldn't have their own mechanism or like a hearing impairment, something of a hearing aid that would help them?
They may or may not,
Okay.
because it might not be a big enough deficit for a hearing aid, but they might just need that amplification in the classroom.
Okay.
So,
Thank you for the clarity on that. Thank you.
You bet.
couple of comments on a suggestion. One is,
Okay.
I actually wore one of these in my work with hearing impaired students for years. It was probably much less sophisticated than this. But one of the benefits to me as a teacher was less fatigue at the end of the day. That I could clearly tell when I was wearing it and when I wasn't, kind of how that compared. One thing that I'll suggest is that we purchase a number of these that would allow us to pilot in a greater way, because it's going to be very hard to survey teachers about something they haven't physically seen or tried. Is this going to be useful to you? So I suggest we do that. We will collect some data from the folks who use it. We'll see what the interest level is of folks on those same campuses, because what I anticipate happening is when half of a grade level starts to use this, there's going to be some desire for the rest of the folks in the grade level, especially at our elementary schools, to do that. But those are things we can measure, and then we can decide on a large-scale purchase at another time. We do have a little bit of time, given that we intended to roll this out as a 22-23 implementation.
One more question on this.
Excuse me.
So this would be coming through our technology, through ESSER funds, through technology, or where would that be coming?
It's ESSER funds.
Oh, ESSER funds, okay, good,
Mm-hmm.
okay, good.
Mr. Blunt.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say, since the comment, I tell you the truth, I loved it, and I still do when I saw it. I think it's absolutely great, to be honest. But remember, I'm sort of the techie person, so, and I think some of the after-school activity, when I go to the classroom, I would definitely take advantage of it. But I do know, and I think Dr. Woods just hit on it, but I thought tonight it says we will be piloted at several elementary campuses in 22 to 23, and then expand out as needed. So that's sort of the plan all along, right? That you're requesting approval. It wasn't.
That was the original plan. I guess what I'm suggesting, Mr. Blunt, if you're listening to the comments tonight, that we pilot on a smaller scale, gather some of the data that's been asked for, and then come back and perhaps ask for a purchase in that neighborhood.
Yeah, but that's, I'm sure I understand, because when I read it, it says that we pilot several elementary campuses, right? I mean, that's what the request was. It wasn't to do everything up front.
Yeah, that was our thought, like Dr. Wood said prior, to kind of hearing the discussion, was obviously not to get them all in and push them out, but to pick a few campuses.
Right.
And we did reach out with a survey to principals, created a one-pager, just lots of information about it and some videos, and asked them what would be their interest. And we asked about 25 elementary campuses, and the majority, I'm not going to say every single one, but the majority want it for every campus, for every classroom, excuse me. And so we've even had a couple principals call, especially calling Mallory, our audiologist, and say, where are those things you guys asked me about in the early fall? Because teachers are tired with the mask and the voice, especially the schools that have portables. That was one of the campuses that that principal is really interested in having it there. So we do have a little bit of information about who's wanting them. The interest has been more elementary than it has been secondary thus far.
But wait a minute, guys, because I'm sorry, we're not saying the same thing here. This proposal says pilot at several elementary campuses. You're asking us for 3,800 units for every classroom in every elementary school.
Well, that was
that's not the same thing. So I'm sorry, I am confused by what is in the presentation does not sound like what you're asking us to approve. Had it been pilot at several elementaries, but you're asking us to approve for every classroom in every elementary, which is not what is being presented in the written proposal. So did that change where you then decided to go from a pilot program to go to every classroom in every elementary, which I don't consider that a pilot. That to me is a full elementary implementation.
So what I'm suggesting is that we will pull this item. We will purchase enough to be comfortable with running a true pilot, answer some of the questions that have been asked by the board, and then perhaps come back.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Dr. Could I?
Yeah, Bobby?
I was going to say,
go ahead.
I'm with you to some extent, but I don't think, just my opinion, we'll see what the others say. I don't think you need to pull it. I think, at least I would say, if you're going to do it this states, then as it states, I don't see why that couldn't be approved unless you think it's that last sentence I was going by, unless you definitely still want to pull it. But I'd support giving this last sentence.
I think the issue is, I don't feel like, given the size of the expenditure, I'm just not comfortable going forward. And I think we need to look at a smaller expenditure that generates us good data.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you.
And then come back. The way to leave it on would, and this would only be if the board were comfortable, would be to approve a purchase for this purpose up to this size.
Right.
Knowing that there'll be some smaller purchases made prior to that, data will be shared with the board and so forth. Those are the only two options that I think I can see.
To me, 3,800 classrooms is not a pilot program.
No, it's a full-out implementation.
It's a full rollout. So to me, I don't know, just the rollout is not what you're asking us to spend to purchase doesn't fit with what is in the actual proposal. So if it was to come to vote for this, I couldn't approve this in the manner that it's written. If Brian, after February academics, so do we have a timeline if after a demonstration at February academics, you could come back with an idea? And more than anything, guys, I don't want us to go into a classroom of a teacher who has heard nothing about this and say, oh, here, you get this box and now you have to wear this around your neck, and have our teachers feel like we have put one more thing on them, even if at the end of the trial they will like it. I don't want us doing this without us telling our teachers up front, this is what we're doing, this is why, and this is the benefit for you. I don't want any principal walking in with, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and the teachers knowing nothing about it. I think it's just too much.
Yeah, this has always been couched as voluntary.
So when
Right, yes, absolutely.
So when this was first, we were talking about putting this on the agenda earlier, and I had a discussion with Dr. Woods and with Dr. Jordan actually just a few days ago. And I've talked to some teachers I know that there is a want by some teachers to have some type of amplification, whether it be with masks or whether they didn't have a mask, because there is some, as Dr. Woods had talked about, teachers speaking all day, and there is some fatigue in that. I see it being just as useful on the secondary level as I do in the elementary school. But, and I understand the conversations that we've had here this evening. Dr. Woods, and I guess I asked a board, so we could essentially, though, tonight approve the expenditure of units that would cover 3 elementary schools?
What's a pilot program to you, Brian?
Yeah, I don't know. I would want to talk with staff before I talk to about a specific number. What I can commit to is a much smaller purchase that would still generate enough data to answer the questions that have been asked.
Okay.
You still need our approval, though, for even that, though, Brian, isn't that true?
That is true unless it's under, 50,000, which isn't going to generate you a lot of units at that unit price. And probably that is not sufficient to generate, frankly, the data that we're talking about.
From a time perspective, how long, Tracy, will it take to get these?
That's a good question. I'm not quite sure. With COVID, we do know that it was taking a little bit longer. But now we've gone through the RFP process, and so we could reach out to the vendor at this point and find out.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to go through an RFP to just order less than the number that we've talked about, though. Is that right?
We've actually gone through the RFP process.
Right.
Correct.
But you wouldn't have to go through another process to order a different amount?
That's correct. We would not.
No.
Okay. So you'll bring this back? Is it the will of the board for us to have this brought back to us? I'm not hearing any objections to that, Dr. Woods.
Okay. All right. So one way to go back to Mrs. Chumley's point about approval on expenditures, and I'm back to what I said about a specific number of units. Why don't we call it 100 for an initial purchase beyond what we already have?
Okay.
And try to spread those out and get some good data.
Sure.
Obviously, for the board, that is roughly a slightly over $100,000 expenditure.
Well, if we did 1,500 units, that's 145,000.
That would be 1.5 million.
And that's if it breaks
doing
down
this
even.
right? I did 103, sorry, guys.
Yeah, I think we can look at a smaller purchase and sufficiently answer the questions that you have, and then consider a larger purchase.
Okay.
So
you'll
do
bring this-
we need to change this and then have it come as a vote, Brian, for that?
It is on for approval now.
Yeah.
The board can make a motion as it sees fit.
Okay, and so what you're recommending is,
To authorize the purchase of 100 units for data gathering purposes.
And then how much would 100 units be again?
$131,000.
then I move approval of this recommendation, changing 3,800 units to 100 units and actually having it implemented as a pilot program.
That dollar amount is just an estimate, would be an estimate.
Yes.
At $100,000
I wouldn't guarantee that includes shipping and taxes
right,
and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm just going to say the change is to 100 units.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to us purchasing 100 units of our sound systems. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay. So we look forward to hearing about what happens. with
Great,
these,
me too.
yeah.
And I'll bring you the sample in February.
But
Thank you.
But on the pilot program, please make sure that we're notifying teachers ahead of time that it doesn't
Absolutely.
show up in their classroom
Absolutely.
on
Thank you.
that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, and I have lost my place here.
Facilities and operations, schematic design, Stevens, Cast, Teach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item that we have for you is the schematic design for Stephen High School Cast Teach Magnet School. And Pfluger Architects, Andrew Perez with Pfluger Architects will give us a quick presentation on what we are proposing for board approval.
Thank you, sir. Madam President, Dr. Woods, board members, good evening. I'm Andrew Bettis with Pfluger Architects, here to present the schematic design for Cast Teach High School located at Stevens High School. So this slide just shows you the location of Stevens High School as it stands today. The road on the south is Petrenko Road with 151 just east of that, and then the access to the school is located off of Ellison Drive. The next slide then zooms in on the area of the campus that we're focusing on for the proposed location. The following slide then is actually a little bit more information that was presented previously in a conceptual planning layout, just to give you a little bit more reason why we chose the location that we chose. You'll notice that the main entrance to Stevens High School is dead center on the campus here. The magnet area then is proposed to be located on the east classroom wing on the first floor only due to its adjacency to the Stevens High School administration, which is just to your right when you walk into the campus, as well as proposed shared science labs that are available to both Stevens High School and the magnet facility. So then on the next slide, this is the program that was developed for this magnet, which is comprised of three main components. The first is the magnet administration, which is very much like what we did for Marshall LMS, with the addition of 2 counselor offices at the request of the campus and just kind of an evolution of that program. The second component then would be 16 general learning classrooms that are associated with the core classes for the magnet program. And then lastly, the CTE component, which is comprised of 2 different sets of learning labs. One early learning lab that is 2 rooms that are built very much like a pre-K through 5th grade classroom at any of your Northside elementary schools. And then the secondary learning labs, which are 2 rooms that are built like middle or high school classrooms. And so those functions are meant to serve as teaching environments that mimic the actual classroom environments that are in your schools now. The CTE program also requires 2 additional general learning classrooms for other curriculum, and so you'll see that in our floor plan. The last 2 pieces that we have for the CTE then are a small library and student workroom, which are actually spaces that are built for the students to use to mimic their environment when they're planning and preparing lessons and so on and so forth. So then on the next slide here is the proposed floor plan. This takes into account the existing area that we would be renovating for this project, as well as a small addition, mainly for a portion of the CTE and the admin component for the magnet. The color-coded rooms here then are comprised of the 16 general learning classrooms in dark blue, the CTE rooms in a light blue, and the admin in red. So when we start on the upper left portion of the screen here, you'll see the 2 early learning labs. Those again are outfitted very much like pre-K through 5th grade classrooms and actually have individual toilet rooms. We also acknowledge that there is a high likelihood that there will be some Northside kids that may go and visit this program in order to enhance the learning environment of the students that are taking these courses. So we want to create a very similar environment to what you have at your elementary school. So we're actually proposing off of that outside a very small playground area that actually has some of your standard playground equipment. The other component for the learning labs that helps to expand out into the space is the addition of collaboration spaces, not unlike what we've put into different magnet programs at Marshall LMS or even at the middle school level at Jones and Zachary Middle School. You'll see then at the upper portion where the collaboration area is that there's also the combo workroom library that was mentioned for those students as well, located in the center of the magnet space. And then on the south end, We have the secondary learning labs, which are those middle and high school classroom spaces that feed into their own collaborative area as well, in addition to the 2 general learning CTE classrooms that are required. So we also have an outdoor space proposed for the secondary learning labs, but it's outfitted more like an outdoor classroom learning environment. So we saw that as a unique opportunity to take advantage of some different outdoor space there. And then lastly, you have the administration in red, which is comprised of all of the different spaces required for the magnet in particular, your program coordinator, vice principal, principal, counselor offices, storage, workroom, and conference room. A couple of items that we have been discussing with the building committee are the design considerations you see on the screen. So you don't see these in the plans yet at this stage of development, but we do want to acknowledge the importance of potential to have one-way glass with two-way audio in the observation rooms, pending, permitting through FERPA requirements, as we've been discussing. Full visibility into and through the workroom and library, so you can kind of envision the treatment of this space similar to how we worked at Jones Middle School, where you have windows that are full height that you can actually see through, so that you can see into the collaboration area, and students passing through the corridor get a little bit of an idea of what's going on. And then lastly, one of the other pieces that we are looking at are outdoor raised planter beds that will serve not only the magnet program and kids that are at all ages that are attending this, but also the Stevens campus itself. So that is something that we will also be looking at a location for when we get a little further down the road in design. So on the next slide here, we wanted to show a couple of images of a couple of different magnet projects that we've done for the district recently, because we want to take a really close look at what this building at Stevens High School is going to look like. So the 2 examples you see on the screen here then are Marshall Law and Medical Services High School and the Jones Magnet Middle School. And we wanted to bring these to you because you can see the decision to build the projects the way that we did really does have a lot to do with the way that the existing campuses and taking into account the architecture of those campuses. So at Marshall High School, it was definitely our intent to pick up on the architectural elements that were there and create a front entrance that looked like it was there all along. Whereas at Jones Middle School, we did see an opportunity to enhance that building that did not really have a strong identity with its own unique entrance and really draw the eye. And so those are different things that we wanted to take into account when looking at the exterior for Stevens High School. And so the next slide here, you'll see Stevens High School itself has very, very distinct architectural elements that we feel would be incredibly challenging to try to abandon, and so we really are leaning more towards the example of LMS over at Marshall. And so on the next slide, you'll see one of the first proposed images of the new front entrance to the magnet program. We purposely set this view up so that you can see the main entrance to Stevens High School as well as the entrance to the gymnasium on the right, and you can see those very prominent raised entrances with colonnades in front of them. And so we wanted to pick up on that for the magnet entrance and create an identity not only for, the magnet, but also something that folds well into the campus. And so we would propose an entrance very similar to the front, but also very distinct identifying signage. And in addition to that, looking at what existing brick patterns are available here and, further down the road, seeing how we might be able to create opportunities to further differentiate the identity of the magnet without completely abandoning what's over at Stevens High School today. So we have one more image for you that just kind of shows a little bit more of the front entrance to the magnet here. This is a 1-story addition on the first floor of the existing facility, and so we've just popped up that entrance again to create that prominent architecture that complements the campus. And that is what we've got for you this evening. So I'd like to answer any questions that you might have.
Before we get started with questions,
Sure.
I just wanted to, this did come before the facilities committee. I think it was just this week, but I don't know, my days are running together. Ms. Chumley, on behalf of, since you are chair of the building committee, would you like to comment?
I would. We spent a lot, first off, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Pfluger for your, I will openly admit that I was concerned when we lost Carr because he's very innovative and creative, but I really want to call you and Robin out for being so flexible and considering, and I want to thank Dr. Harrell because the first blush, I don't think we had quite as much of some of the, what I look at is innovative spaces in this design. But I really want to thank you for coming back and hearing what the board said about that, and really coming back with, I think, a great design. And so we had a lot of discussion in building committee about what it would look like. And there's actually some other changes that we had asked about that you have brought back and implemented already. So I just want to tell you thank you. And I think you've done a really good job. And I think in building committee, we were very pleased with what we're seeing as the opportunities for our kids, both on an elementary and secondary level, our high school students to be able to look at and learn not only the academic piece, but also how to teach that within the scope of this campus. And the changes that you made to this design, I think, reflect that. So we were very pleased with it and felt that it should be approved.
Thank you.
In building. But I just wanted you to know, I thank you so much. Not all architects are flexible about wanting to change designs, but you really jumped into it and I think brought the whole context of what we're looking at with CAST into this design.
Okay. Any other comments?
I would just agree with everything Melissa said and congratulate you as taking all that information and making it come alive for students. It's really student-focused now, which is great. I just had one suggestion. We don't see the purple pillars, right? Right? Right, Ms. Chumley? You wanted purple
I'll share
pillars
that.
as they came in?
So we were talking about the outside that we want. We don't want to lose the integrity of the appearance of Stevens, but we did want to see, and Andrew said that they will bring that back when we look at exterior colors, something maybe using those, those colors to still give it a distinct feel that it is a magnet there as well. And so as part of the conversation was that the magnet school colors are purple and gray.
Yes.
And I just asked Andrew to please not come back with exterior purple on the building.
Yes, I didn't put that one on the presentation, but we did hear you loud and clear.
Well, and to add to that, though, it could be an option. I think it would be a great option to include, and then we could look at it, because truly the logo does have purple in it. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to honor some of that too, and we'll look at it and then bring it back to the board for that approval at the time.
I could handle a purple logo.
Just a noteworthy point, if I may, the funding for this project has been designated as 2014 bond savings for now. As you will probably see here in a few minutes, we've also recommended this project as part of the 2022 bond. So the budget provision here is for savings, but it may change depending on the outcome of the 22 bond initiative.
Okay. All right. Is there any further discussion? Is there a motion?
No. I have a motion that we approve the schematic design for Stevens High School CAST Teach Magnet.
I have a motion and a second to approve the schematic design of CAST Teach. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, ayes have it, motion carries, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here. Okay, next item on the agenda under business and finance is the CAFR report for 2020-2021 year. Dr. Barajas.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. We have with us tonight the partner on the job from Weaver, Adam McCain, who is going to go through a presentation to describe what the auditors go through and what they look at during the audit of our financial statements.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you guys today. I think there's a presentation they'll be pulling up here momentarily. But I'd like to let you guys know how much I appreciate the support that we get from the district, and let you know that the information they provide to us, very transparent, very timely information, and so that really allows us to be able to spend our time auditing the financial statements, not have to reconcile and figure out what the numbers mean because the district has already done that. So you can skip probably this slide, one more slide. And so I'm really going to speak to what we perform in the audit itself. I know that management keeps you guys up to speed on the numbers, and so I'm not going to speak to your numbers at all, but speak to the audit process and the results of our audit. So just as a reminder, kind of what our audit timeline looks like. We really look at this as a cyclical process, and we start our audit planning, as soon as our previous audit is over. But we really kind of jump into the summertime as you guys are closing the books. We start working on our engagement planning, reading minutes, talking to management, find out what's happened at the district. We come out and perform what we call interim field work, which is where we spend time looking at internal controls, processes, procedures. Then we come out again in October and November and perform our final field work, where we dig into the balances, actually test transactions, look at the general ledger, look at reconciliations, things like that. Then we spend December and January working with management on the preparation of the annual comprehensive financial report itself, reviewing, making sure that we're all happy with the presentation there, and then come present to you in January, and then look forward to get starting for the next year. You can skip one more too. As just kind of reminder, what is our responsibility, what's management's responsibility. That entire annual financial report is prepared by management. There's really just about 6 pages in there that are ours. The rest is the district's. So the first being the independent auditor's report on the district's financial statements comes from us, and we insert it, and then we insert our report on internal controls and on compliance for major federal programs. But the rest of that document is prepared by management. Next slide, please. So we're responsible for auditing those financial statements. Management prepares those financial statements. We also look at the supplemental information. So you've got within your financial report document, there's the financial statements themselves, there's the footnotes, and then there's a good bit of supplementary information that really kind of supports and breaks down the actual financial statements themselves, provides a lot of different information and color to those. We also are required to communicate any identified fraud and abuse. You would be hearing about that prior to now if we did identify any. Next slide, please. Also required to communicate any material non-compliance related to laws, regulations, contracts, grants, agreements that we come across in performing our audit procedures. We also provide an opinion on your schedule of expenditure of federal awards. And express an opinion over compliance over major federal programs, which one of those includes all the ESSER funds that you guys were talking about before. One more slide, please. And so we do perform a risk-based audit. We don't look at every single transaction that flows through your financial statements. We perform risk assessment procedures to identify areas where we feel like we need to focus our efforts. So some of those risk assessment procedures include review of historical, financial, and non-financial data, discussions and interviews with management employees, review of board and committee minutes, looking at any external monitoring reports that the district may receive, gaining an understanding of, and in some instances, testing internal controls over financial reporting and compliance. So while we do try to perform the majority of our planning up front, it is an ongoing process, and so any information that comes to light throughout our audit process, we do modify our audit plan, and that could mean that we adjust and change significant areas and areas of focus for our audit. So just to kind of inform you guys on some of what we see those key risk areas where we spend a significant portion of our effort. General cash disbursements, capital asset disbursements, payroll, and employee benefits are all areas that we spend a good amount of time. We understand and look at the internal controls. For cash disbursements and payroll, we actually perform internal control tests to make sure and place some reliance on the internal controls that the district has in place. We look at various analytical procedures. We compare expenditures to budget, approved budgets, preliminary and final budgets. Make sure that we feel like the money is being spent in the way that the board and public has intended those monies to be spent. We also look at the state and federal revenue. As you can imagine, significant compliance requirements attached to a lot of that, and so we do look to make sure that the money is being spent the way that it should be spent and that the compliance requirements are being met. And then we spend a good amount of time looking at just various balance sheet reconciliations. With as many accounts as the district has, it's easy for money to get, sit on the balance sheet and get forgotten about, sit in a, miscellaneous prepaid account or, miscellaneous accrual account. And so we do spend a good amount of time looking at reconciliations of all those accounts to make sure that we don't feel like any of that's happening. One more. So you can look at these next two slides as kind of your report card. They really are kind of a summary of our audit. And so you'll see we've got lots of green, which is good on here. So we are issuing an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, highest level of opinion we can issue. We did not identify any material weaknesses in internal control or any significant deficiencies. And we did not identify any non-compliance that's material to the financial statements. Then with respect to the federal awards or the single audit, you guys do represent a low-risk auditee based on risk assessment criteria. We did not identify any material weaknesses over internal control over compliance or significant deficiencies. And we did not identify any audit findings that are required to be reported under the uniform guidance, which is the guidance that defines the single audit requirements. Other than that, I'll go through these at a pretty high level, that just some of our required communications. It's important to remember that the preparation of the financial statements, any financial statements, includes estimates. We do take a look at the significant estimates that go into the financial statements and look at the inputs to those estimates, the methodologies, make sure that we feel like estimates are presented appropriately within the scope of the financial statements. A few significant estimates that impact your financial statements: allowance for uncollectible receivables, taxes, the fair value of investments, depreciation expense. There's a few estimates that really kind of come from third parties. Management doesn't have a whole lot of input to these, but that's the IBNR for healthcare, workers' comp, the self-insurance, the net pension liability, and the other post-employment benefits or retiree healthcare. Financial statements should be read with the footnotes to the financial statements. They provide a lot of additional information. There's some important disclosures that we would point towards, primarily the pension plan and the OPEB plan, commitments and contingencies. I really like to point to note number 1, which is includes kind of the just general accounting policies as well. I'll touch on just a few of these things that really kind of go through things that we would have communicated to you already. We did not run into any material errors, illegal acts, anything like that. We didn't run into any aggressive or inappropriate accounting treatments that we had to talk about with management. We didn't have any difficulties or disagreements. All these things are things that we would be speaking with you in advance had we run into those things. I'm not aware of management consulting with any other accounting firms regarding any accounting treatments. And management has signed a representation letter to us kind of clarifying all of their representations that go in to the preparation of the financials. Last thing, and really this is for management more than it is the board, but there is a new accounting standard that will be implemented next year, GASB 87. It has to do with leases. Any of you that are involved in any commercial accounting, that's a big hot topic right now, but it'll just be a process that the district will have to undergo to kind of identify any leases that are in place, and there's a little bit of different accounting treatments for leases going forward. Outside of that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys may have related to the audit.
So this was discussed in finance meeting yesterday. Mr. Lopez, do you have any comments as chair of that committee?
Yes, thank you. If you could kind of just elaborate on the new guidance for the board.
On the lease standard?
Yeah, the restatement, and explain a little bit in you don't have to go too far in detail, but just so that way they have an understanding of what you told us in the meeting.
Absolutely.
With the lease agreements.
So this leases has been a hot topic in the accounting world, both in governmental accounting and in commercial accounting. And so the new accounting standards, effectively, so you used to have what was called, you could think about operating leases, something like copiers. So, if the district, and I'm not saying you have because we haven't gone through this evaluation, if you were leasing copiers, it's possible that those leases wouldn't even show up on your balance sheet. They would just be an expense every year as you paid through those. The new standard would identify that as a lease, and you would record what's called a right of use asset on the books. So you'd record an asset and you would record a liability. So you would have that liability, that obligation would be sitting on your books. And so what the district is going to have to do is kind of go through they'll have to go through contracts that they have in place and evaluate whether there are any significant leases that may need to be considered to be recorded as leases for next year. The primary areas that we're seeing this, especially in school districts, are equipment and technology, whether it be software or hardware type equipment for technology. And so the district will have to go through a process. We're available to help with that. There's other people that can help with that, but go through with and it is a little bit of a complex definition of what meets the criteria of a lease. So it will, be a little bit of a process. But identify what is going to meet the requirement of a lease and aggregate that information to perform the accounting, capitalize the asset, and put the liability on the books.
So we went through that very quickly yesterday, too. Any questions? Okay, this is for approval of the board. Before we go further, too, I know that there are some hard copies here tonight, but they are draft copies of our CAFR report. And in the past, I know we've all been provided hard copies, but as I said yesterday, it's electronic here. I would decline mine. Is there anybody here that would like a hard copy? The staff will provide them to us. No problem. Just one? I mean, y'all, it's okay. I would like to. Okay, two? Anybody else? Okay, so after assuming that we approve this, if y'all could provide a couple copies to board members.
And Ms. Freeman, we will email out to everybody, in addition to anyone who wants a hard copy, the final, since it is now approved.
Okay. All right. Yes, Mr. Lopez.
Just one more thing, too. I think with our partnerships with Weaver and our school district and our finance team, Renee and your department, it was good stuff. It was good to see them working together, and a lot of work was put on our finance department. So, thank them for doing that and working with Weaver on that. It's so important for the public to see that and that this report is unmodified. So a lot of credit goes out to you, Renee, and your team, and Mr. Weaver and the Weaver Company. So thank you so much for that. I recommend that we approve the annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year 2020 and 2021.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the CAFR report as presented. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And
Thank you all very much.
Work with our
Appreciate it.
staff.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda, we have first reading of policy EHBAA local. Mr. Galindo.
Yes, ma'am, and actually at your place, all of you in the green folder have all three next items, A, B, and C. They are, as you'll see, very short. In fact, the first two policies are literally one sentence and come as a result of a change in statute. And the third one is a minor change that we brought to, all of these have been taken to policy, and Naomi Miller actually will present and give you a little more detail on them. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. As Mr. Galindo stated, these have all been taken to the policy committee in December. So basically, TASB's policy office contacted us in November, recommending that we adopt the policies under items A and B. And that was as a result of the fact that Northside is going through an IDEA cyclical monitoring review this year to determine compliance with new state and federal laws as they pertain to students with disabilities. So TEA is requiring the first two policies, EHBAA local and EHB local, and they're pretty self-explanatory, but EHBA local, BAA local, as recommended by TASB, is a new policy related to the district's ongoing training opportunities for teachers of students with dyslexia. So that brings us in compliance with that subject. And then in item B, EHB local, as recommended by TASB, is a new policy to ensure that a student transitioning from early childhood intervention has an IEP developed and implemented by their 3rd birthday. So these are 2 brand-new policies written by TASB. They went before policy on December 8th, and I'm bringing them to you today for first reading.
Okay. Any
Okay.
questions? Go ahead. Sorry. I don't see any questions.
Okay. Item C is DEC local, which is on compensation and benefits. We actually brought this for some updates. This is an older policy, but was brought to you in the last TASB update. And in updating that policy after we brought it to you on first and second reading, our HR department noticed that we had some inconsistencies in what constitutes a leave year in DEC local and what is in DECA legal. And all we've done is change the language to be consistent with the legal policy and the local policy. And I did that with Mrs. Hill. So that language, again, went before the policy committee, and so we're just making that update so it's consistent with the legal policy. And you'll see that on page 4 of DEC, which is a 6-page policy.
Any questions?
I've got one, I'm not sure, and if I'm off tangent, y'all let me know. I'm wanting to understand, so if we have an employee that's on a 12-month contract and is paid additional stipends for that, how does that, is there anything that impacts them in relation to their leave?
I would have to find that out from payroll and from Mrs. Hill.
Okay, I'll get it on one of the committees to, I just would like to, or maybe just a Friday letter. I just would like to understand how the number of days in the contract impacts leave.
Okay. I'll get that answer for you by the end of this week.
No, Naomi, it can, just
Yes, ma'am.
when you have time, but I just would like to understand that.
Dr. Woods, were you going to say something?
No, other than we'll get that answered and get it out to trustees.
Okay.
And these are all for first reading, Ms. Freeman, so there is no action required.
So they'll come back next board meeting, next general board?
For approval.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Okay. Next item on the agenda, under Superintendent, bond consideration and approval. Dr. Woods.
So, turn my mic on. So, as trustees recall, we had a conversation just a week ago where we talked about projects that have been proposed, how they got to be proposed, the discussion of the Citizens Bond Committee related to those projects. We also mentioned at that time that we were concerned that we had seen some data from nearby school districts who had recently bid some projects, and those numbers had come in quite high, well over what they had projected, and enough to cause a concern for us. So what I'm going to walk the board through tonight is a little bit of a review of that conversation. We're going to highlight for you some changes that we have made considering the inflationary pressure we're seeing, at least in the near term, in other districts. And then I'll circle back to a couple of items that we spent a fair amount of time on and recommend to the board how we might handle those items and why that is. This item is very much first because it will take the board's consideration and approval before we can do the next two items, which are related to an order calling an election, and then finally a resolution that would allow us to conduct the election along with Bexar County, which has been our practice in the past. So if we can go forward, please. As you know, we have developed a list of projects that fall into 8 categories. Some of these categories represent much larger dollar numbers than others, but they do fit into those 8 categories. If we can carry on. On potential projects, the first one is new schools. We do have one new school proposed. What you see highlighted here is the change from what we showed you a week ago to what we think that number should be to protect us and make sure that we can get all of the projects that we say in this list done, actually done in a bond proposal. So moving on to the next slide, you can see here quite a list of renovation and reconstruction projects. There are a number of these that represent changes, and I'll walk through those. The top one is an inflationary change. On the second one, Leroy and his staff felt like, even with a review of what we were seeing in the local market, that was a sufficient dollar amount, and so no need to change. As mentioned in the conversation last night, we were told by bond counsel that the line item that we had carried called the synthetic turf replacement and track resurfacing at Gus, if we were to do that in a bond, it must stand on its own as its own proposition, given the new law. And so we recommend pulling that item and doing that work out of savings of some type. We've also pulled the next 2 items, mostly to deal with the inflationary situation that we're seeing. We wanted to be able to make promises on projects that we could keep. And so in the struggle to decide which projects might come off, we obviously picked the 2 that were non-school based. That doesn't mean these projects are not worth doing, and it doesn't mean we wouldn't come back to the board should the inflationary concern not materialize to the degree, and recommend that these projects be done at a later date. But at this point, in order to ensure affordability and that we can get all of these projects complete, we would recommend pulling those from the discussion that you've seen in the past. So moving on then to slide 5, you see a continuation of the reconstruction work at some of our oldest schools. As you well know, that is very much the theme of this bond proposal, is to go back to some of our oldest campuses and start to renovate and reconstruct those campuses. And again, you can see relatively small changes in the dollar amount proposed due to concern to make sure we have enough dollars budgeted. If you carry on to slide 6, this is a continuation of work at our oldest campuses. You see several of those dollar amounts changed to deal with the concern about budget. And then finally on slide 7 is the rest of the list of school-based projects to include, in this case, some work at some of our magnet programs, the agricultural science magnet, the science and engineering magnet. You've heard it, you saw Cast Teach and saw that schematic design earlier, and then magnet programs at 3 middle schools.
Brian, what percentage are we adding on inflation? Did you come across each one with the same percentage, or did you review the scope of the project?
But we try to do the latter. Rather than adding a flat percentage, we try to look at the scope and complexity of the projects, and also the initial number per square foot that we used before. We also have to consider things like, is this a greenfield construction project, or is this a significant renovation to a building, which is always more expensive than new construction. So there wasn't, to answer your question, there's not a flat percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Did you give any consideration to the timing? I mean, I know that we haven't talked about timing of some of these, but, I mean, we usually have some idea, right?
There is some idea of timing, but only in such that we know, for instance, the new school must happen almost immediately to deal with overcrowding of schools in that immediate area. We know some of the projects For instance, that the turf project, we knew that was going to be towards the end of the bond anyway, because we know we want to maximize the life cycle of the equipment that's currently there. So some of those factors are known, but as far as which years for which projects, we don't have a itemized list at this point. And some of that, frankly, will be decided once we start to see more information about how are these projects coming in from a bid standpoint. It may change our strategy just so we can maximize our situation in the market.
Which is nothing new than what we've done in the past.
Which is not new. So, sorry, I lost my spot. So I'm now on to slide 8, and you can see some cost increases there. I do want to spend a moment on the last item on slide 8. We talked quite a bit about a baseball, softball district complex adjacent to Sotomayor, not tied to the school directly, but adjacent to it on the same piece of property. We talked about the possibility that that could be added into the general proposition, and here you see the recommendation that it would be added to the general proposition, as we've been advised by bond counsel is okay to do. Then I'll move on slide 9. You can see some of the infrastructure projects that we identified, and you can also see some increases in cost estimates. On slide 10, you can see a continuation of a project that we brought to the board with regard to ESSER funds, and this is going back to our oldest campuses and looking at the ventilation systems on those campuses and making significant improvements, and in many cases, simply gutting it and starting fresh, as there's no cost-efficient way to make a significant improvement short of that in a 40, 50, 60-year-old campus. And so some of those projects will have already been considered by the board for ESSER funds. Others would be continued, assuming the bond proposal is passed by voters. In the coming slides, you'll see exactly what you saw a week ago. We feel like the cost estimates on slide 11 with regard to these infrastructure projects, boilers and energy controls, are sufficient. The same on 12 with regard to electrical upgrades, lighting, paving, and drainage. The same on 13 with those relatively small projects with tennis courts and flooring, as well as on roofing and waterproofing, which is obviously a larger, much more extensive project at 22 sites. On item 15, you can also see this is purely a continuation of what we have already discussed with regard to fire alarms, door hardware, and surveillance cameras. On slide 16, also with safety and security video servers that serve those surveillance cameras and access control upgrades in our buildings. And then coming towards the end, in slide 17, you can see no change in what we discussed previously about technology, nor on slide 18 is there a change in what we discussed with regard to buses and other vehicles to transport students, nor on 19 is there a change with regard to bond management costs. We don't see that being impacted by the current situation. So I'll draw the board's attention to a summary slide that is on slide 20. Again, we've tried to highlight in yellow those that we've specifically went to and adjusted costs due to what we're seeing in the market, at least in the short term. You can see there were not changes made to the other categories. The one obvious add, you saw 3 subtractions from what you saw a week ago. You saw the subtraction of the Gus turf and track that I mentioned before. You saw the 2 non-school sites were pulled out completely in this recommendation. You saw that the baseball softball field, as we discussed, could happen last week, was added to this recommendation. So the net change went from our discussion last week, if baseball and softball were not added, and before the reduction of the three projects that I identified as $938.9 million to what now sits at $992 million. So there is one other significant item that you do not see on here that I want to bring to the board's attention. We have long discussed with this board and then with the Citizens Bond Committee the need to do some significant renovation work at the George Block Aquatic Center, which is adjacent to us here tonight. As the board knows, that item would need to be on a proposition all on its own. It could not have been included in this general proposition. After a lot of consideration of the need for the work at George Block, I am going to recommend to this board that we include the baseball softball complex as you've seen, which should free us to be able to do the work at George Block, perhaps over time, perhaps not in one fell swoop, but perhaps over time, out of bond savings and general fund savings. Counterintuitively, the reason for that recommendation is not because we think the work at George Block is somehow optional or not needed. It's the contrary of that. It's the fact that we believe the work is so needed at that facility that is this year turning 50 years old. We have a significant difference in the quality of the facility that our students and our communities use, depending upon what part of the district you happen to be using them. And we really, like so many of these other projects that try to close the gap between what we would build in a new school today and what existed 55 or 60 years ago, this recommendation is in line with that logic in that I think it's just essential for us to be able to do that work at that facility. As we discussed a week ago, that facility serves not just student athletes who are in our aquatics program, swimming and diving, but also everything from swim lessons to 3-year-olds to community swim time for adults and others. It is used most of 7 days a week. And that is true with the other facilities as well, don't get me wrong. But when you look at the amenities, the quality of what's available here compared to what we have at the other complex, there is, by and large, not a comparison. And so, happy to answer any questions, but just want to reiterate the recommendation to the board is, based on our prior discussion, is to pull those 3 projects so that we can get this done in a way that ensures our ability to get them all done in this dollar amount, to add the baseball softball project as we've discussed, and then to try to, to commit to the work at George Block, perhaps in more than one phase, over a period of time paid for out of savings.
Okay. Brian, can you talk about the tax implication of that change from 938 to 992?
I can. Thanks for asking that. When we went to our Citizens Bond Committee and began this conversation, and obviously the board before that, we have had for quite a while an opinion from our financial advisor that up to $1 billion in bond-related debt for these projects would not cause a tax rate increase. And so with regard to that question, we do not see the need for a tax rate increase for Northside taxpayers at 992, nor would we have at 938.
Okay. Any other questions? We've looked at these numbers a lot, y'all, and I know you put your rationale in the Friday letter. I don't know if you've had any questions from each board member, but Mr. Blunt?
Yeah, I just said, and thank Dr. Woods for the summary and the rationale. I still would have preferred to see that in there. I think everybody knows that part of it, the aquatics. But given the strategy And, you know, the point of we've got a way of going forward with that in a different sort of space or different sort of vein, I think that's good. I think that's the most important thing to say, not considering some of the other things that others may, but I think that's good. So I think I'm fine with that. But again, I would have preferred to go ahead and try it, but I understand.
A lot of work to do going forward. Is there a motion?
What the heck? I move approval of $992 million bond proposal.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion in 2 seconds.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dr. Harrell had made this second motion, I think, if my ears are working right here.
Let me make sure that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
Karen, let me just rephrase
Sure.
this because I didn't. So I approve of an order calling a bond election to be held. Am I on the right one? Am I?
We're not quite there yet.
No, I'm on A still, but I just want to make sure that
This essentially what you're
okay,
acting on.
so I just want to make sure that my motion is clear and that it's worded correctly.
Yeah.
So I'm moving that we approve a bond of $992 million.
Okay, and that was the motion.
Yeah,
That was
so
the
we're
original
good.
motion, and it was seconded. And I think everybody said aye. We can-
Yes.
Okay,
Unanimous
and
vote.
just for confirmation, all those opposed, same sign. Okay, ayes have it, motion carries, and our bond proposal approval consideration passes 7-0.
Got it.
Okay. Next item, Dr. Woods.
So moving on to item B, members, this is a approval of an order calling for the bond election. This is a legal document that is drawn up by bond counsel based on the recommendation that was made and that you just approved. So this is an order calling for a bond election to be held at the $992 million, as Mrs. Chumley said, in a single proposition for the May election of 2022. The order is, for the most part, very similar to those that we have looked at in the past when we have called bond elections. There is an exception, and I want to point that out so that everybody sees it. So if board members will scroll, you've got the order attached to your agenda. If you will scroll all the way down to page 10, it's the last page in the order.
Page 9?
Page 10.
Oh,
And if you'll look at the top of page 10. Everybody okay? So this is the actual ballot language that would be on a ballot on the May election. So I don't think any of it will surprise you until you read the last sentence of what's in bold there.
Right, and for the record, it does say this is a property tax increase, when in actuality, we are telling our voters it is not.
That's correct. So when we are out giving information to voters and potential voters in the spring, we will try to address this because it is going to be confusing for folks.
It's going to be horribly confusing.
This is an element that passed with House Bill 3 a session ago. And regardless of what the impact actually is to a school district's tax rate, this statement must appear on the bond language, and it must be the last statement in the bond language. So I want to point that out to the board so that there's a complete understanding of what we're dealing with, because this will be confusing and it will take some explanation, and we will try to highlight this for folks ahead of the actual voting time But while I am recommending the board approve the resolution, this language, it must by statute be included. I just wanted to point it out because it is different compared to what we've had in the past.
But Brian, am I missing the point where you said it was going to be a tax increase? Because this is saying the estimated maximum annual increase, and it shows $0.
No, if you go up
What
on
am I
that same
missing?
page to where the language is all in bold, or all in capitals, sorry, all
In the
capitalized.
box. Oh, this is a property, I'm sorry, I missed it, the very last sentence. I went all the way down thinking it was the last sentence on the page.
So, would obviously recommend approval, but just wanted to highlight that for the board. Some of us have had that conversation, but just wanted to be clear about that.
Brian, go through that again. Why does the legislature require us to say it's a property tax increase when it's not?
I have no answer for you other than a political one.
So on any bonds, is it city bonds too, or is it just school district bonds? They have to put that wording in there?
Renee, you got an answer to that? I don't.
We have bond counsel here who can address that. Stephanie, if you could, I don't know the answer to that.
Excellent.
Just schools or cities.
Stephanie, thanks for being here. Good thing, because I wasn't going to be able to answer.
Good afternoon, Stephanie Leiby with Norton Rose Fulbright. We serve as bond counsel for the district, and the language in the proposition is specific to school districts. It was adopted by the legislature in 2019 as a component of House Bill 3, which was the school finance overhaul legislation.
So no other entity that requires bonds is required to put a statement that is untruthful in their bond proposition.
No other entity that calls a bond election is required to put that language.
Other than school districts.
Other than school districts.
Now, Brian, if you, or all of us, if we look at the very last line, where it says the very last box, the estimated maximum annual increase, if you notice, it says 0 there.
Yeah, but truthfully, how many people are going to go to the very
But we're going to
bottom and
have
read
to
that? We're gonna
convince
have to teach
people
them about it.
that
That's part of the district's education efforts when it goes out to inform voters and potential voters related to the bond about the actual tax rate impact that the bond proposition would have on the district's annual property tax rate.
This is a huge statement of what our legislature is wanting to happen to school districts that need bond funds. This is wrong. This is wrong. They're making us lie on our bond proposition.
And
That's terrible.
And nevertheless,
We have to do it.
we have to do it.
I recommend approval.
Thank you.
Thanks. Is there a motion?
Calling a bond order.
Can we just read, Dr. Woods, can she just read B? Is your mic on?
No,
Ish.
mic's not on. Go ahead.
I move that we approve the order calling for a bond election.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries.
Okay,
Dr. Woods?
Karen, can we,
Yes.
just real quick, it's related but different item. Is this something we can bring up during the grassroots as a resolution?
Absolutely.
Okay, we may want to do that then. We have time.
Write that down.
That's a good thought.
Okay.
Naomi, will you hang on to that thought? You
It
and I
needs
can
to be
draft some
addressed in the
language.
next biennium. It needs to be addressed at the next legislative session.
Ready for item C?
Okay, yes, sir.
So item C, and at least in my agenda, I apologize, I don't see this actually attached. This is the resolution that agrees, that the board agrees to conduct this election in concert with the Bexar County election that will be going on in the same day. This is our practice. This is what we've done in the past. It helps us to defray costs from the election to conduct it in concert with the county. It is not different than what we've done in the past. Now, that said, if the board's more comfortable with us bringing this particular item back, we can certainly do that. I apologize, but I missed that. But that's the purpose of the resolution.
All right, what is the pleasure of this board?
Can you say the question one more time?
Yeah. The resolution is not attached, but it's the same resolution. Is there somebody that can pull it up?
But it's the
staff?
resolution saying that we will have the election with the city in May. Yes.
So we don't have the resolution attached to be able to prove the actual wording of the resolution. Does it impact us, Brian, if we put it on February?
I don't believe so, no. No, I think we're okay. We can come back with that item. What we really was essential was items A and B from a timeline perspective.
Yeah.
I think it makes more sense with this particular issue that we actually see the resolution, though I doubt there'll be anything in it that there will be any concerns with.
Okay. I don't anticipate that being an issue, but I'm happy to bring that back the next time the board meets.
Okay. All right.
And
Future agenda items.
Lastly, Ms. Freeman, the trustees have a folder. In that folder is try to reschedule of the board dinner that we postponed in the past. If you could mark which ones that you're available and give those to Monica on your way out tonight. There's some material that Stan Lang and his group created. There are some invitations as well as cards for you, including the invitation to Library Palooza, and I think a t-shirt related to that. And then obviously a list of future agenda items. We do meet twice in the month of February. Typically at the first meeting in February, we begin to talk about the budget for the coming school year. In this meeting, we're also going to spend a fair amount of time doing some analysis of the current year budget just because of the impacts of COVID and attendance issues and so forth. And then obviously a regular meeting in February as well.
Okay, so regarding the board dinner, I guess if y'all know what your schedule is, leave it with Monica, otherwise email her as soon as possible. That'd be okay? Yes.
That'll be great. Sooner the better, just so we can get the campus to get a date on their calendar.
Just FYI, put like 1, 2, and 3, just in case.
Okay. All right.
I just, and there's time before the February 22nd meeting, but those first 4 items on the future agenda, I'm not sure about that, so that's something we can come back and discuss, though. We've got time.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand.
Board recognition.
Oh,
Yeah, I'll talk, we will discuss that part of it.
come back and talk.
But yeah, that was a placeholder so that we wouldn't just drop the ball.
Okay.
and before we adjourn this, Dr. Woods, I'd like to request that, obviously, there's a lot of work that went into the bond proposal coming to us tonight over a whole lot of time. I'd like to thank our staff for all that they've done, but the work of the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee. And is there a way we officially thank them? We have all their email addresses, explain our rationale for our decision this evening and all of that, Dr. Woods?
Yes, ma'am. What we owe them is an explanation of the conversation tonight and the result of that conversation. So we'll get that to them within the next week or so. And then I'm going to meet with some particular stakeholders and just make sure they're fully aware of kind of the rationale behind what we decided. So that work is upcoming.
Okay. But for the record, just the board appreciates all the work that's gone into this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Monica, where did the cookies come from? Oh, okay. North Food Service, yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank y'all.
Well, we have executive session.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm not leaving, yeah.
We have executive session
Okay,
right
so the
now. Board
Board of Trustees on January 25th, 2022, beginning at, let's say, 10 minutes at 9, let's say 9:30 PM, will convene in closed meeting in accordance with Texas Government Code, Section 551.074. All right. The Board of Trustees on January 25th, 2022, beginning at 9:51 PM, will convene an open meeting. Is there a motion to come before the board?
All the administrative recommendations as discussed in closed session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the admin appointments as discussed in executive session. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr. Blunt, did you have a comment? Okay, I'm sorry. All those opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, motion carries. And unless there's any objection, the board ended this meeting tonight at 9:52 PM on January 25th, 2022.